This is Audible.
Crossroad Press presents The Thief of Always, written by Clive Barker, narrated by Adam Verner. Chapter 1. Harvey, half devoured. The great gray beast February had eaten Harvey Swick alive. Here he was, buried in the belly of that smothering month, wondering if he would ever find his way out through the cold coils that lay between here and Easter. He didn't think much of his chances. More than likely, he'd become so bored as the hours crawled by that one day he'd simply forget to breathe. Then maybe people would get to wondering why such a fine young lad had perished in his prime. It would become a celebrated mystery, which wouldn't be solved until some great detective decided to recreate a day in Harvey's life. Then, and only then, would the grim truth be discovered. The detective would first follow Harvey's route to school every morning, trekking through the dismal streets. Then he'd sit at Harvey's desk and listen to the pitiful drone of the history teacher and the science teacher, and wonder how the heroic boy had managed to keep his eyes open. And finally, as the wasted day dwindled to dusk, he traced the homeward trek. And as he set foot on the step from which he had departed that morning, and people asked him, as they would, why such a sweet soul as Harvey had died, he would shake his head and say, "It's very simple." "Oh," the curious crowd would say, "do tell." And brushing away a tear, the detective would reply, Harvey Swick was eaten by the great gray beast February. It was a monstrous month, that was for sure. A dire and dreary month. The pleasures of Christmas, both sharp and sweet, were already dimming in Harvey's memory, and the promise of summer was so remote as to be mythical. There'd be a spring break, of course, but how far off was that? 5 weeks? 6? Mathematics wasn't his strong point, so he didn't irritate himself further by attempting and failing to calculate the days. He simply knew that long before the sun came to save him, he would have withered away in the belly of the beast. "You shouldn't waste your time sitting up here," his mom said when she came in and found him watching the raindrops chase each other down the glass of his bedroom window. "I've got nothing better to do," Harvey said, without looking around. "Well then, you can make yourself useful," his mom said. Harvey shuddered. Useful? That was another word for hard labor. He sprang up, marshaling his excuses. He hadn't done this, he hadn't done that. But it was too late. "You can start by tidying up this room," his mom said. "But don't sit wishing the days away, honey. Life's too short." But that's a good boy. And with that, she left him to it. Muttering to himself, he stared around the room. It wasn't even untidy. There were 1 or 2 games scattered around, a couple of drawers open, a few clothes hanging out. It looked just fine. "I am 10, he said to himself. Having no brothers and sisters, he talked to himself a good deal. "I mean, it's not like I'm a kid. I don't have to tidy up just because she says so. It's boring." He wasn't just muttering now. He was talking out loud. I want to. He went to the mirror and quizzed it. What do I want? The straw-haired, snub-nosed, brown-eyed boy he saw before him shook his head. "I don't know what I want," he said. "I just know I'll die if I don't have some fun. I will. I'll die." As he spoke, the window rattled. A gust of wind blew hard against it. Then a second, then a third, and even though Harvey didn't remember the window being so much as an inch ajar, it was suddenly thrown open. Cold rain spattered his face. Half closing his eyes, he crossed to the window and fumbled to slam it, making sure that the latch was in place this time. The wind had started his lamp moving, and when he turned back, the whole room seemed to be swinging around. One moment the light was blazing in his eyes, the next it was flooding the opposite wall. But in between the blaze and the flood, it lit the middle of his room. And standing there, shaking the rain off his hat, was a stranger. He looked harmless enough. He was no more than 6 inches taller than Harvey, his frame scrawny, his skin distinctly yellowish in color. He was wearing a fancy suit, a pair of spectacles, and a lavish smile. "Who are you?" Harvey demanded, wondering how he could get past this interloper to the door. "Don't be nervous," the man replied, teasing off one of his suede gloves, taking Harvey's hand and shaking it. "My name's Rictus. You are Harvey Swick, aren't you?" "Yes." "I thought for a moment I'd got the wrong house." Harvey couldn't take his eyes off Rictus's grin. It was wide enough to shame a shark, with 2 perfect rows of gleaming teeth. Rictus took off his spectacles, pulled a handkerchief from the pocket of his waterlogged jacket, then started to mop off the raindrops. Either he or the handkerchief gave off an odor that was far from fragrant. The smell, in truth, was flatulent. "You've got questions, I can see that," Rictus said to Harvey. "Yeah." "Ask away. I've got nothing to hide." "Well, how did you get in, for one thing?" "Through the window, of course." "It's a long way up from the street." "Not if you're flying." "Flying?" "Of course. How else was I going to get around on a foul night like this? It was either that or a rowboat. We short folk gotta watch out when it's raining this hard. One wrong step and you're swimming." He peered at Harvey quizzically. "Do you swim?" "In the summer, sometimes," Harvey replied, wanting to get back to the business of flying. But Rictus took the conversation in another direction entirely. "On nights like this," he said, "doesn't it seem like there'll never be another summer?" "It sure does," said Harvey. "You know, I heard you sighing a mile off, and I said to myself, there's a kid who needs a vacation." He consulted his watch. "If you've got the time, that is." "The time?" "For a trip, boy, for a trip. You need an adventure, young Swick, somewhere out of this world." "How'd you hear me sighing when you were a mile away?" Harvey wanted to know. "Why should you care? I heard you, that's all that matters." "Is it magic of some kind?" "Maybe." "Why won't you tell me?" Rictus gave Harvey a beady stare. "I think you're too inquisitive for your own good, that's why," he said, his smile decaying a little. "If you don't want help, that's fine by me." He made a move toward the window. The wind was still gusting against the glass, as though eager to come back in and carry its passenger away. "Wait," Harvey said. "For what?" "I'm sorry. I won't ask any more questions." Rictus halted, his hand on the latch. "No more questions, eh?" "I promise," said Harvey. "I told you, I'm sorry." "So you did, so you did." Rictus peered out at the rain. "I know a place where the days are always sunny," he said, "and the nights are full of wonders." "Could you take me there?" "We said no questions, boy. We agreed." "Oh, yeah, I'm sorry." "Being a forgiving sort, I'll forget you spoke. And I'll tell you this, if you want me to inquire on your behalf, I'll see if they've got room for another guest." "I'd like that." "I'm not guaranteeing anything," Rictus said, opening the latch. "I understand." The wind gusted suddenly and blew the window wide. The light began to swing wildly. "Watch for me," Rictus yelled above the din of rain and wind. Harvey started to ask him if he'd be coming back soon, but stopped himself in the nick of time. "No questions, boy," Rictus said. And as he spoke, the wind seemed to fill up his coat. It rose around him like a black balloon, and he was suddenly swept out over the windowsill. "Questions rot the mind," he hollered as he went. "Keep your mouth shut, and we'll see what comes your way." And with that, the wind carried him off, the balloon of his coat rising like a black moon against the rainy sky. Chapter 2. The Hidden Way. Harvey said nothing about his peculiar visitor to either his mom or his dad, in case they put locks on the windows to stop Rictus returning to the house. But the trouble with keeping the visit a secret was that after a few days, Harvey began to wonder if he'd imagined the whole thing. Perhaps he'd fallen asleep at the window, he thought, and Rictus had simply been a dream. He kept hoping, nevertheless. "Watch for me," Rictus had said. And Harvey did just that. He watched from the window of his room. He watched from his desk at school. He even watched with one eye when he was lying on his pillow at night. But Rictus didn't show. And then, about a week after that first visit, just as Harvey's hope was waning, his watchfulness was rewarded. On his way to school one foggy morning, he heard a voice above his head and looked up to see Rictus floating down from the clouds. His coat swelled up around him so that he looked fatter than a prize pig. "How you doing?" he said as he descended. "I was starting to think I'd invented you," Harvey replied. "You know, like a dream." "I get that a lot," Rictus said, his smile wider than ever. "Particularly from the ladies. You're a dream come true, they say," he winked. "And who am I to argue? You like my shoes?" Harvey looked down at Rictus's bright blue shoes. They were quite a sight, and he said so. "I got given 'em by my boss," Rictus said. "He's very happy you're going to come visit. So, are you ready?" "Well..." "It's no use wasting time," Rictus said. "There may not be room for you tomorrow." "Can I just ask one question?" "I thought we agreed." "I know, but just one." "All right. One." "Is this place far from here?" "Nah, it's just across town." "So, I'd only be missing a couple of hours of school?" "That's two questions," Rictus said. "No, I'm just thinking out loud." Rictus grunted. "Look," he said, "I'm not here to do a great song and dance persuading you. I got a friend called Jive, does that. I'm just a smiler. I smile and I say, 'Come with me to the holiday house.' And if folks don't want to come," he shrugged, "hey, it's their hard luck." With that, he turned his back on Harvey. "Wait," Harvey protested. "I want to come, but just for a little while." "You can stay as long as you like," Rictus said, "or as little. All I want to do is take that glum expression off your face and put one of these up there." His grin grew even larger. "Is there any crime in that?" "No," said Harvey. "That's no crime. I'm glad you found me. I really am." So what if he missed all of the morning at school, he thought. It'd be no great loss. Maybe an hour or two of the afternoon as well. As long as he was back home by 3 or 4. Certainly before dark. "I'm ready to go," he said to Rictus. "Lead the way." Millsap, the town in which Harvey had lived all his life, wasn't very big, and he thought he'd seen just about all of it over the years. But the streets he knew were soon behind them, and though Rictus was setting a fair speed, Harvey made sure he kept a mental list of landmarks along the way, in case he had to find his way home on his own. A butcher's shop with 2 pigs' heads hanging from hooks. A church with a yard full of old tunes beside it. The statue of some dead general covered from hat to stirrups in pigeon dung. All these sights and more he noted and filed away. And while they walked, Rictus kept up a stream of idle chatter. "I hate the fog. Just hate it," he said. "And there'll be rain by noon. We'll be out of it, of course." He went on from talk of rain to the state of the streets. "Look at this trash all over the sidewalk. It's shameful. And the mud, it's making a fine old mess of my shoes." He had plenty more to say, but none of it was very enlightening. So after a while, Harvey gave up listening. How far was this holiday house? He began to wonder. The fog was chilling him, and his legs were aching. If they didn't get there soon, he was going to turn back. "I know what you're thinking," said Rictus. "I bet you don't." "You're thinking this is all a trick. You're thinking Rictus is leading you on a mystery tour, and there's nothing at the end of it. Isn't that true?" "Maybe a little." "Well, my boy, I've got news for you. Look up ahead. He pointed, and there, not very far from where they stood, was a high wall, which was so long that it disappeared into the fog to right and left. What do you see? Rictus asked him. A wall, Harvey replied, though the more he stared at it, the less certain of this he was. The stones, which had seemed solid enough at first sight, now looked to be shifting and wavering, as though they'd been chiseled from the fog itself and piled up here to keep out prying eyes. It looks like a wall, Harvey said, but it's not a wall. You're very observant, Rictus replied admiringly. Most people just see a dead end, so they turn around and take another street. But not us. No, not us. We're going to keep on walking. You know why? Because the holiday house is on the other side? What a miraculous kid you are, Rictus replied. That's exactly right. Are you hungry, by the way? Starving. Well, there's a woman waiting for you in the house called Mrs. Griffin. And let me tell you, she is the greatest cook in all of America land. I swear on my tailor's grave. Anything you can dream of eating, she can cook. All you have to do is ask. Her deviled eggs, he smacked his lips. Perfection. I don't see a gate, Harvey said. That's because there isn't one. So, how do we get in? Just keep walking. Half out of hunger, half out of curiosity, Harvey did as Rictus had instructed. And as he came within 3 steps of the wall, a gust of balmy, flower-scented wind slipped between the shimmering stones and kissed his cheek. Its warmth was welcome after his long, cold trek, and he picked up his pace, reaching out to touch the wall as he approached it. The misty stones seemed to reach for him in their turn, wrapping their soft, gray arms around his shoulders and ushering him through the wall. He looked back, but the street he'd stepped out of, with its gray sidewalks and gray clouds, had already disappeared. Beneath his feet, the grass was high and full of flowers. Above his head, the sky was midsummer blue, and ahead of him, set at the summit of a great slope, was a house that had surely been first imagined in a dream. He didn't wait to see if Rictus was coming after him, nor to wonder how the gray beast February had been slain and this warm day risen in its place. He simply let out a laugh that Rictus would have been proud of, and hurried up the slope and into the shadow of the dream house. Chapter 3. Pleasure and the Worm. What a fine thing it would be, Harvey thought, to build a place like this, to drive its foundations deep into the earth, to lay its floors and hoist its walls, to say, where there was nothing, I raised a house. That would be a very fine thing. It wasn't a puffed-up peacock of a place either. There were no marble steps, no fluted columns. It was a proud house, certainly, but there was nothing wrong with that. It had much to be proud of. It stood 4 stories high and boasted more windows than Harvey could readily count. Its porch was wide, as were the steps that led up to its carved front door. Its slated roofs were steep and crowned with magnificent chimneys and lightning rods. Its highest point, however, was neither a chimney nor a lightning rod, but a large and elaborately wrought weather which Harvey was peering up at when he heard the front door open and a voice say, Harvey Swick, as I live and breathe. He looked down, the weather vane's white silhouette still behind his eyes, and there on the porch stood a woman who made his grandmother, the oldest person he knew, look young. She had a face like a rolled-up ball of cobwebs, from which her hair, which could also have been spider's work, fell in wispy abundance. Her eyes were tiny, her mouth tight, her hands gnarled. Her voice, however, was melodious and its words welcome. I thought maybe you'd decided not to come, she said, picking up a basket of freshly cut flowers she'd left on the step. Which would have been a pity. Come on in. There's food on the table. You must be famished. I can't stay long, Harvey said. You must do whatever you wish, came the reply. I'm Mrs. Griffin, by the way. Yes, Rictus mentioned you. I hope he didn't bend your ear too much. He loves the sound of his own voice. That and his reflection. Harvey had climbed the porch steps by now and stopped in front of the open door. This was a moment of decision, he knew, though he wasn't quite certain why. Step inside, Mrs. Griffin said, brushing a spider hair back from her furrowed brow. But Harvey still hesitated, and he might have turned around and never stepped inside the house, except that he heard a boy's voice yelling, I got ya, I got ya, followed by uproarious laughter. Wendell, Mrs. Griffin said, are you chasing the cats again? The sound of laughter grew even louder, and it was so full of good humor that Harvey stepped over the threshold and into the house, just so that he could see the face of its owner. He only got a brief look. A goofy, bespectacled face appeared for a moment at the other end of the hallway. Then a piebald cat dashed between the boy's legs, and he was off after it, yelling and laughing again. He's such a crazy boy, Mrs. Griffin said. But all the cats love him. The house was more wonderful inside than out. Even on the short journey to the kitchen, Harvey glimpsed enough to know that this was a place built for games, chases, and adventures. It was a maze in which no two doors were alike. It was a treasure house where some notorious pirate had hidden his blood-stained booty. It was a resting place for carpets flown by djinns and boxes sealed before the flood, where the eggs of beasts that the earth had lost were wrapped and waiting for the sun's heat to hatch them. It's perfect, Harvey murmured to himself. Mrs. Griffin caught his words. Nothing's perfect, she replied. Why not? Because time passes, she went on, staring down at the flowers she'd cut. And the beetle and the worm find their way into everything sooner or later. Hearing this, Harvey wondered what grief it was Mrs. Griffin had known or seen to make her so mournful. I'm sorry, she said, covering her melancholy with a tiny smile. You didn't come here to listen to my dirges. You came to enjoy yourself, didn't you? I guess I did, Harvey said. So, let me tempt you with some treats. Harvey sat himself down at the kitchen table, and within 60 seconds, Mrs. Griffin had set a dozen plates of food in front of him. Hamburgers, hot dogs, and fried chicken, mounds of buttered potatoes, apple, cherry, and mud pies, ice cream and whipped cream, tangerines, and a plate of fruits he couldn't even name. He set to eating with gusto, and was devouring his second slice of pie, when a freckled girl with long, frizzy blonde hair and huge blue-green eyes ambled in. You must be Harvey, she said. How did you know? Wendell told me. How did he know? She shrugged. He just heard. I'm Lulu, by the way. Did you just arrive? No, I've been here for ages, longer than Wendell, but not as long as Mrs. Griffin. Nobody's been here as long as she has, isn't that right? Almost, said Mrs. Griffin, a little mysteriously. Do you want something to eat, sweetie? Lulu shook her head. No, thanks. I haven't got much of an appetite at the moment. She nevertheless sat down opposite Harvey, stuck her thumb in the mud pie, and licked it clean. Who invited you here? She asked. A guy called Rictus. Oh, yeah. The one with the grin? That's him. He's got a sister and two brothers, she went on. You've met them, then? Not all of them, Lulu admitted. They keep themselves to themselves. But you'll meet one or two of them sooner or later. I don't think I'll be staying, Harvey said. I mean, my mom and dad don't even know I'm here. Sure they do, Lulu replied. They just didn't tell you about it. This confused Harvey, and he said so. Call your mom and dad, Lulu suggested. Ask them. Can I do that? He wondered. Of course you can, Mrs. Griffin replied. The phone's in the hallway. Carrying a spoonful of ice cream with him, Harvey went to the phone and dialed. At first, there was a whining sound on the line, as though a wind were in the wires. Then, as it cleared, he heard his mom say, "Who is this?" "Before you start yelling," he began. "Oh, honey," his mom cooed. "Did you arrive?" "Arrive? You are at the holiday house, I hope?" "Yes, I am, but oh, good. I was worried maybe you'd lost your way. Do you like it there?" "You knew I was coming?" Harvey said, catching Lulu's eye. "I told you," she mouthed. "Of course we knew," his mom went on. "We invited Mr. Rictus to show you the place. You looked so sad, you poor lamb. We thought you needed a little fun." "Really?" said Harvey, astonished by this turn of events. "We just want you to enjoy yourself," his mom went on. "So you stay just as long as you want." "What about school?" he said. "You deserve a little time off," came the reply. "Don't you worry about anything. Just have a good time." "I will, Mom." "Bye, honey." "Bye." Harvey came away from the conversation shaking his head in amazement. "You were right," he said to Lulu. "They arranged everything." "So now you don't have to feel guilty," said Lulu. "Well, I guess I'll see you around later, huh?" And with that, she ambled away. "If you're finished eating," Mrs. Griffin said, "I'll show you to your room." "I'd like that." She duly led Harvey up the stairs. At the landing, basking on the sun-drenched windowsill, was a cat with fur the color of the cloudless sky. "That's Blue Cat," Mrs. Griffin said. "You saw Stew Cat playing with Wendell. I don't know where Clue Cat is, but he'll find you. He likes new guests." "Do you have a lot of people coming here?" "Only children. Very special children like you and Lulu and Wendell. Mr. Hood won't have just anybody." "Who's Mr. Hood?" "The man who built the holiday house," Mrs. Griffin replied. "Will I meet him too?" Mrs. Griffin looked discomfited by the question. "Maybe," she said, her gaze averted. "But he's a very private man." They were up on the landing by now, and Mrs. Griffin led Harvey past a row of painted portraits to a room at the back of the house. It overlooked an orchard, and the warm air carried the smell of ripe apples into the room. "You look tired, my sweet," Mrs. Griffin said. "Maybe you should lie down for a little while." Harvey usually hated to sleep in the afternoon. It reminded him too much of having the flu or the measles. But the pillow looked very cool and comfortable, and when Mrs. Griffin had taken her leave, he decided to lie down, just for a few minutes. Either he was more tired than he thought, or the calm and comfort of the house rocked him into a slumber. Whichever, his eyes closed almost as soon as he put his head on the pillow, and they did not open again until morning. Chapter 4. A Death Between Seasons. The sun came to wake him soon after dawn, a straight, white dart of light laid on his lids. He sat up with a start, wondering for a moment what bed this was, what room, what house. Then his memories of the previous day returned, and he realized that he'd slept through from late afternoon to early morning. The rest had strengthened him. He felt energetic, and with a whoop of pleasure, he jumped out of bed and got dressed. The house was more welcoming than ever today. The flowers Mrs. Griffin had set on every table and sill singing with color. The front door stood open, and sliding down the gleaming banisters, Harvey raced out onto the porch to inspect the morning. A surprise awaited him. The trees, which had been heavy with leaves the previous afternoon, had shed their canopies. There were new, tiny buds on every branch and twig, as though this were the first day of spring. "Another day, another dollar," said Wendell, ambling around the corner of the house. "What does that mean?" said Harvey. "It's what my father used to say all the time. Another day, another dollar. He's a banker, my dad. Wendell Hamilton II. And me, I'm..." Wendell Hamilton III? How'd you
Hope
know?
you're doing well.
Lucky guess. I'm Harvey. Yeah, I know. Do you like tree houses? I never had one. Wendell pointed up at the tallest tree. There was a platform perched up among the branches, with a rudimentary house built upon it. I've been working up there for weeks, said Wendell, but I can't get it finished alone. You want to help me? Sure, but I've got to eat something first. Go eat. I'll
Hell
be
yeah.
around. Harvey headed back inside and found Mrs. Griffin setting out a breakfast fit for a prince. There was milk spilt on the floor and a cat with a tail hooked like a question mark, lapping it up. Clue cat? He said. Yes, indeed, Mrs. Griffin said fondly. He's the wicked one. Clue cat looked up, as if he knew he was being talked about. Then he jumped up onto the table and searched among the plates of pancakes and waffles for something more to eat. Can he do whatever he likes? Harvey said, watching the cat sniff at this and that. I mean, does nobody control him? Ah, well, we all have somebody watching over us, don't we? Mrs. Griffin replied.
My day was
Whether we like it or not.
None.
Now eat. You've got some wonderful times ahead of you. Harvey didn't need a second invitation. He dug into his second meal at the holiday house with even more appetite than he had the first, and then headed out to meet the day. Oh, what a day it was. The breeze was warm and smelled of the green scent of growing things. The perfect sky was full of swooping birds. He sauntered through the grass, his hands in his pockets, like the lord of all he surveyed, calling to Wendell as he approached the trees. Can I come up? If you've got a head for heights, Wendell dared him. The ladder creaked as he climbed, but he made the platform without missing a step. Wendell was impressed. Not bad for a new boy, he said. We had 2 kids here, couldn't even get halfway up. Where'd they go? Back home, I suppose. Kids come and go, you know. Harvey peered out through the branches, upon which every bud was bursting. You can't see much, can you? He said. I mean, there's no sign of the town at all. Who cares? Said Wendell. It's just gray out there anyway. And it's sunny here, Harvey said, staring down at the wall of misty stones that divided the grounds of the house from the outside world. How's that possible? Wendell's answer was the same again. Who cares? He said. I know I don't. Now, are we going to start building or what? They spent the next 2 hours working on the treehouse, descending a dozen times to dig through the timbers heaped beside the orchard, looking for boards to finish their repairs. By noon, they'd not only found enough wood to fix the roof, but they had each found a friend. Harvey liked Wendell's bad jokes, and that who cares, which found its way into every other sentence. And Wendell seemed just as happy to have Harvey's company. You're the first kid who's been real fun, he said. What about Lulu? What about her? Isn't she any fun? She was okay when I first arrived, Wendell admitted. I mean, she's been here months, so she kind of showed me the place. But she's gotten weird the last few days. I see her sometimes wandering around like she's sleepwalking, with a blank expression on her face. She's probably going crazy, Harvey said. Her brain's turning to mush. Do you know about that stuff? Wendell wanted to know, his face lighting up with ghoulish delight. Sure I do, Harvey lied. My dad's a surgeon. Wendell was most impressed by this, and for the next few minutes listened in gaping envy as Harvey told him about all the operations he'd seen. Skulls sawn open and legs sawn off, feet sewn on where hands used to be, and a man with a boil on his behind that grew into a talking head. You swear? Said Wendell. I swear, said Harvey. That's so cool. All this talk brought on a fierce hunger, and at Wendell's suggestion, they climbed down the ladder and wandered into the house to eat. What do you want to do this afternoon? He asked Harvey as they sat down at the table. It's going to be real hot. It always is. Is there anywhere we can swim? Wendell frowned. Well, yes, he said doubtfully. There's a lake around the other side of the house, but you won't much like it. Why not? The water's so deep you can't even see the bottom. Are there any fish? Oh, sure. Maybe we could catch some. Mrs. Griffin could cook them for us." At this, Mrs. Griffin, who was at the stove piling up a plate with onion rings, gave a little shout and dropped the plate. She turned to Harvey, her face ashen. "You don't want to do that," she said. "Why not?" Harvey replied. "I thought I could do whatever I wanted." "Oh, yes, of course you can," she told. "But I wouldn't want you to get sick. The fish are poisonous, you see." "Oh," said Harvey. "Well, maybe we won't eat them after all." "Look at this mess," Mrs. Griffin said, fussing to cover her confusion. "I need a new apron." She hurried away to fetch one, leaving Harvey and Wendell to exchange puzzled looks. "Now I really have to see those fish," Harvey said. As he spoke, the ever-inquisitive Clue Cat jumped up onto the counter beside the stove, and before either of the boys could move to stop him, he had his paws up on the lip of one of the pans. "Hey, get down," Harvey told him. The cat didn't care to take orders. He hoisted himself up onto the rim of the pan to sniff at its contents, his tail flicking back and forth. The next moment, disaster. The tail danced too close to one of the burners and burst into flames. Clue Cat yowled and tipped over the pan he was perched upon. A wave of boiling water washed him off the top of the stove, and he fell to the ground in a smoking heap. Whether drowned, scalded, or incinerated, the end was the same. He hit the floor dead. The din brought Mrs. Griffin hurrying back. "I think I'm going to go eat outside," Wendell said as the old woman appeared at the door. He snatched up a couple hot dogs and was gone. "Oh, my Lord," Mrs. Griffin cried when she set eyes on the dead cat. "Oh, you foolish thing." "It was an accident," Harvey said, sickened by what had happened. "He was up on the stove. Foolish thing, was all Mrs. Griffin seemed able to say. She sank down onto her knees and stared at the sad little sack of burned fur. "No more questions from you," she finally murmured. The sight of Mrs. Griffin's unhappiness made Harvey's eyes sting. But he hated to have anyone see him cry, so he fought back his tears as best he could and said, "Shall I help you bury him?" in his gruffest voice. Mrs. Griffin looked around. "That's very sweet of you," she said softly. "But there's no need. You go out and play." "I don't want to leave you on your own," Harvey said. "Oh, look at you, child," Mrs. Griffin said. "You've got tears on your cheeks." Harvey blushed and wiped them away with the back of his hand. "Don't be ashamed to weep," Mrs. Griffin said. "It's a wonderful thing. I wish I could still shed a tear or two." "You're sad," Harvey said. "I can see that." "What I feel is not quite sadness," Mrs. Griffin replied. "And it's not much solace either, I'm afraid." "What's solace?" Harvey asked. "It's something soothing," Mrs. Griffin said, getting to her feet. "Something that heals the pain in your heart." "And you don't have any of that?" "No, I don't," Mrs. Griffin said. She reached out and touched Harvey's cheek. "Except maybe in these tears of yours, they comfort me." She sighed as she traced their tracks with her fingers. "Your tears are sweet, child, and so are you. Now, you go out into the light and enjoy yourself. There's sun on the step, and it won't be there forever, believe me." "Are you sure?" "I'm sure." "I'll see you later then," Harvey said, and headed out into the afternoon. Chapter 5. The Prisoners. The temperature had risen while Harvey had been at lunch. A heat haze hovered over the lawn, which was lusher and more thick with flowers than he remembered, and it made the trees around the house shimmer. He headed toward them, calling Wendell's name as he went. There was no reply. He glanced back toward the house, thinking he might see Wendell at one of the windows, but they were all reflecting the pristine blue. He looked from house to heavens. There was not a cloud in sight. And now a suspicion stole upon him, which grew into a certainty as his gaze wandered back to the shimmering cups and the flowers underfoot. During the hour he'd spent in the cool of the kitchen, the season had changed. Summer had come to Mr. Hood's holiday house, a summer as magical as the spring that had preceded it. That was why the sky was so faultlessly blue, and the birds making such music. The leaf-laden branches were no less content, nor the blossoms in the grass, nor the bees that buzzed from bloom to bloom, gathering the season's bounty. All were in bliss. It would not be a long season, Harvey guessed. If the spring had been over in a morning, then most likely this perfect summer would not outlast the afternoon. I'd better make the most of it, he thought, and hurried in search of Wendell. He finally discovered his friend sitting in the shade of the trees, with a pile of comics at his side. "Want to sit down and read?" he asked. "Maybe later," said Harvey. "First, I want to go look at this lake you were talking about. Are you going to come?" "What for? I told you it's no fun." I'll go on my own." "You won't stay long," Wendell remarked. He went back to his reading. Though Harvey had a good idea of the lake's general whereabouts, the bushes on that side of the house were thick and thorny, and it took him several minutes to find a way through them. By the time he caught sight of the lake itself, the sweat on his face and back was clammy, and his arms had been scratched and bloodied by barbs. As Wendell had predicted, the lake wasn't worth the trouble. It was large, so large that the far side was barely visible, but gloomy and drear, both the lake and the dark stones around it covered with a film of green scum. There was a legion of flies buzzing around in search of something rotten to feed on, and Harvey guessed they'd have no trouble finding a feast. This was a place where dead things belonged. He was about to leave when a movement in the shadows caught his eye. Somebody was standing further along the bank, almost eclipsed by the mesh of the thicket. He moved a few paces closer to the lake and saw that it was Lulu. She was perched on the slimy stones at the very edge of the water, gazing into their depths. Speaking in a near whisper for fear he'd startle her, Harvey said, "It looks cold." She glanced up at him, her face full of confusion, and then, without a word of reply, turned and bounded away through the bushes. "Wait!" Harvey called, hurrying toward the lake. Lulu had already disappeared, however, leaving the thicket shaking. He might have gone in pursuit of her, but the sound of bubbles breaking in the lake took his gaze to the waters. And there, moving just below the coating of scum, he saw the fish. They were almost as large as he was, their gray scales stained and encrusted, their bulbous eyes turned up toward the surface like the eyes of prisoners in a watery pit. They were watching him. He was certain of that, and their scrutiny made him shudder. Were they hungry, he wondered, and praying to their fishy gods that he'd slip on the stones and tumble in? Or were they wishing he'd come with a rod and a line so that they could be hauled from the depths and put out of their misery? What a life, he thought. No sun to warm them, no flowers to sniff at or games to play, just the deep, dark waters to circle in, and circle and circle and circle. It made him dizzy just watching, and he feared that if he lingered much longer, he'd lose his balance and join them. Gasping with relief, he turned his back on the sight and returned into the sunlight as fast as the barbs would allow. Wendell was still sitting underneath the tree. He had 2 bottles of ice-cold soda in the grass beside him, and lobbed one to Harvey as he approached. "Well," he said. "You were right," Harvey replied. "Nobody in their right mind ever goes there." "I saw Lulu." "What did I tell you?" Wendell crowed. "Nobody in their right mind." "And those fish." "Yeah, I know," Wendell said, pulling a face. "Ugly boogers, aren't they?" "Why would Mr. Hood have fish like that? I mean, everything else is so beautiful. The lawns, the house, the orchard." "Who cares?" said Wendell. "I do," said Harvey. "I want to know everything there is to know about this place." Why? So I can tell my mom and dad about it when I go home. Home? Said Wendell. Who needs it? We've got everything we need here. I'd still like to know how all this works. Is there some kind of machine making the seasons change? Wendell pointed up through the branches at the sun. Does that look mechanical to you? He said. Don't be a dope, Harvey. This is all real. It's magic, but it's real. You think so? It's too hot to think, Wendell replied. Now sit down and shut up. He tossed a few comics in Harvey's direction. Look through these. Find yourself a monster for tonight. What's happening tonight? Halloween, of course, Wendell said. It happens every night. Harvey plunked himself down beside Wendell, opened his soda, and began to leaf through the comics, thinking as he leafed and sipped that maybe Wendell was right, and it was too hot to think. However this miraculous place worked, it seemed real enough. The sun was hot, the soda was cold, the sky was blue, the grass was green. What more did he need to know? Somewhere in the middle of these musings, he must have dozed off, because he woke with a start to find that the sun was no longer dappling the ground around him, and Wendell was no longer reading at his side. He reached for his soda, but the bottle had fallen over, and the scent of sweet cherry had attracted hundreds of ants. They were crawling over it and into it, many drowning for their greed. As he got to his feet, the first real breeze he'd felt since noon blew, and a leaf, its edges sear, spiraled down to land at his feet. Autumn, he murmured to himself. Until this moment, standing beneath the creaking boughs, watching the wind shake down the leaves, autumn had always seemed to him the saddest of seasons. It meant that summer was over, and the nights would be growing long and cold. But now, as the drizzle of leaves became a deluge, and the patter of acorns and chestnuts a drumming, he laughed to see and hear its coming. By the time he was out from under the trees, he had leaves in his hair and down his back, and was kicking them up with every racing step. As he reached the porch, the first clouds he'd seen all afternoon crept over the sun, and their shadow made the house, which had wavered in the heat of the afternoon like a mirage, suddenly loom dark and solid. You're real, he said, as he stood panting on the porch. You are, aren't you? He started to laugh at the foolishness of talking to a house, but the smile went from his face as a voice, so soft he was barely certain he heard it, said, What do you think, child? He looked for the speaker, but there was nobody at the threshold, nor out on the porch, nor on the steps behind him. Who said that? He demanded. There was no answer, which he was glad of. It hadn't been a voice at all, he told himself. It had been a creak of the boards underfoot, or the rustling of dry leaves in the grass. But he stepped into the house with his heart beating a little faster, reminding himself as he went that questions weren't welcome here. What did it matter anyway, he thought, whether this was a real place or a dream? It felt real, and that was all that mattered. Satisfied with this, he raced through the house into the kitchen, where Mrs. Griffin was weighing down the table with treats. Chapter 6. Seen and Unseen. Well, said Wendell as they ate, what are you going to be tonight? I don't know, Harvey said. What are you going to be? A hangman, he said with a spaghetti grin. I've been learning how to tie nooses. Now all I've got to do is find someone to hang. He eyed Miss Griffin. It's quick, he said. You just drop 'em and snap. Their necks break. That's horrible, Mrs. Griffin said. Why do boys always love talking about ghosts and murders and hangings? Because it's exciting, Wendell said. You're monsters, she replied with a hint of a smile. That's what you are, monsters. Harvey is, Wendell said. I've seen him filing down his teeth. Is it a full moon? Harvey said, smearing ketchup around his mouth and putting on a twitch. I hope so. I need blood. Fresh blood. Good, said Wendell. You could be a vampire. I'll hang 'em and you can suck their blood. Horrible, Mrs. Griffin said again.
Hey,
What?
Sasquatch, how you
Horrible.
doing, bro?
Perhaps the
We
house
just
had heard Harvey
drinking
wishing
some
for a full
roaches up.
moon, because when he and Wendell traipsed upstairs and looked out the landing window, there, hanging between the bare branches of the trees, was a moon as wide and as white as a dead man's smile.
How's your evening
Look
going?
at it, Harvey said. I can see every crater. It's perfect. Oh, that's just the start, Wendell promised, and led Harvey to a large, musty room, which had been filled with clothes of every description. Some were hung on hooks and coat hangers. Some were in baskets like actors' costumes. Still more were heaped at the far end of the room on the dusty floor. And, half hidden until Wendell cleared the way, was a sight that made Harvey gasp. A wall covered from floor to ceiling with masks. Where did they all come from? Harvey said, as he gaped at this spectacle. Mr. Hood collects them, Wendell explained, and the clothes are just stuff that kids who visited here left behind. Harvey wasn't interested in the clothes. It was the masks that mesmerized him. They were like snowflakes, no two alike. Some were made of wood and of plastic, some of straw and cloth and paper mache. Some were as bright as parrots, others as pale as parchment. Some were so grotesque he was certain they'd been carved by crazy people. Others so perfect they looked like the death masks of angels. There were masks of clowns and foxes, masks like skulls decorated with real teeth, and one with carved flames instead of hair. Take your pick, said Wendell. There's bound to be a vampire somewhere. Whatever I come in here wanting to find, I find it sooner or later. Harvey decided to leave the pleasure of choosing a mask until last, and concentrated instead on digging up something suitably bat-like to wear. As he worked through the piles of clothes, he found himself wondering about the children who'd left them here. Though he'd always hated history lessons, he knew some of the jackets and shoes and shirts and belts had been out of fashion for many, many years. Where were their owners now? Dead, he presumed, or so old it made no difference. The thought of these garments belonging to dead folk brought a little shudder to his spine, which was only right. This was Halloween, after all, and what was Halloween without a few chills? After a few minutes of searching, he found a long black coat with a collar he could turn up, which Wendell pronounced very vampiric. Well satisfied with his choice, he went back to the wall of faces, and his eyes almost immediately alighted upon a mask he hadn't previously seen.
Hell yeah.
With the pallor and deep sockets of a soul just risen from the tomb. He took it down and put it on. It fitted perfectly. What do I look like? Harvey asked, turning to face Wendell, who had found an executioner's mask, which fitted him just as well. Ugly as sin. Good. There was a flickering family of pumpkin heads lined up on the porch when they stepped outside, and the misty air smelled of wood smoke. Where do we go trick-or-treating? Harvey wanted to know. Out in the street? No, said Wendell. It's not Halloween out in the real world, remember? We're going to go around to the back of the house. That's not very far, Harvey remarked, disappointed. It is at this time of night, Wendell said creepily. This house is full of surprises. You'll see. Harvey looked up at the house through the tiny eye holes of his mask. It loomed as large as a thunderhead, its weather vane sharp enough to stab the stars. Come on, said Wendell. We've got a long trip ahead. A long trip? Harvey thought, how could it be a long trip from the front of the house to the back?
My fingers are already...
But once again, Wendell was right. The house was full of surprises. The trip, which would have been a 2-minute walk in the bright afternoon, soon became a trek that had Harvey wishing he'd brought a flashlight and a map. The leaves rustled underfoot, as though snakes were swarming through them. The trees that had shaded them by day now looked frightful in their nakedness, gaunt and hungry. Why am I doing this? He asked himself as he followed Wendell through the darkness. I'm cold, and I'm uncomfortable. He might have added frightened to the list, but he left that thought unsaid. As he was about to suggest they turn back, Wendell pointed up and hissed, Look! Harvey looked. Directly overhead, a form was moving silently against the sky. as if it had just launched itself from the eaves of the house. The moon had slunk away behind the roof and shed no light upon this night flyer, so Harvey could only guess at its shape from the stars it blotted out as it sailed. Its wings were wide but ragged. Too ragged to bear it up, he thought. Instead, it seemed to claw at the darkness as it went, as though it were crawling on the very air itself. A glimpse was all Harvey had, then it was gone. What was that? He whispered. He got no answer. In the moments he'd taken staring up at the sky, Wendell had disappeared. Wendell? Harvey whispered. Where are you? There was still no reply, just the slithering in the leaves and the moan of hungry branches. I know what you're doing, Harvey said louder this time. And you won't scare me that easy. Hear me? This time there was a reply of sorts, not words, but a creaking sound from somewhere in the trees. He's climbing up into the treehouse, Harvey thought, and determined to catch Wendell and scare him back, he followed the sound. Despite the nakedness of the branches, their mesh kept all but a glimmer of starlight from falling on the groves. He slipped his mask down around his neck so as to see a little better. But even then he was nearly blind and had to listen out for the sound of Wendell's ascent to guide him. He could still hear the creaks plainly enough and stumbled in their direction, his arms outstretched to grasp the ladder when he reached it. Now the sound was so loud, he was certain he must be standing beneath the tree. He looked up, hoping to catch a glimpse of the trickster, but as he did so, something brushed his face. He snatched at it, but it was gone, at least for the moment. Then it came again, brushing his brow from the other side. He snatched at it a second time. Then, as it touched him again, caught hold of it. Got you, he cried. His yell of triumph was followed by a rush of air and the sound of something crashing to the ground at his side. He jumped, but refused to let go of whatever he was holding. Wendell, he called. By way of a reply, a flame flared in the darkness behind him, and a firework erupted into a shower of green sparks, its light making a gangrenous cavern of the grove. By its flickering light he saw what he held, and seeing, let out a panicked yammering that had the crows rising from their roosts overhead. It was not a ladder he'd heard creaking, it was a rope. No, not even a rope, a noose. And in his hand, the leg of the man hanging from the noose. He let go of it and stumbled backward, barely suppressing a second shout as his eyes rose to meet the dead man's stare. To judge by his expression, he had died horribly. His tongue lolled from his foamy lips. His veins were so swollen with blood, his head looked like a pumpkin. Either that, or it was a pumpkin. A fresh fountain of sparks now burst from the firework, and Harvey saw the truth of the matter. The limb he'd held was a stuffed trouser leg, the body a coat spilling bundles of clothes. That head, a mask on a pumpkin, with cream for spittle and eggs for eyes. Wendell, he yelled, turning his back on the scene of execution. Wendell was standing on the far side of the firework, his ear-to-ear grin lit by its spitting sparks. He looked like a little demon, fresh from the inferno. At his side was the ladder that had come crashing down to get the drama underway. I warned ya, Wendell said, holding up his mask. I said I was going to be a hangman tonight. I'll get you back for this, Harvey said, his heart still beating too fast for him to see the funny side of this. I swear, I'll get you back. You can try, Wendell crowed. The firework was beginning to fizzle out, the shadows around them beginning to deepen again. Had enough of Halloween for tonight? He asked. Harvey didn't much like admitting defeat, but he nodded grimly, swearing to himself that when he finally got his revenge, it would be choice. Smile, Wendell said, as the fountain of sparks dwindled. We're in the holiday house. The light had almost gone, and even though Harvey was still enraged at Wendell and at himself for being such a sucker, he couldn't let it die away without making peace. All right, he said, allowing himself a tiny smile. There'll be other nights. Always, said Wendell. The reply pleased him. That's what this place is, he said, as the light went out. It's the house of always. Chapter 7. A Present from the Past. There was a Thanksgiving feast awaiting them when they got back into the house. You look as though you've been in the wars, Mrs. Griffin remarked, when she set eyes on Harvey. Has Wendell been up to his tricks? Harvey admitted that he'd fallen for all of them, but there was one that impressed him in particular. What was that? Said Wendell with a smug grin. The falling ladder? That was a clever little touch, wasn't it? No, not the ladder, said Harvey. What then? The thing in the sky. Oh, that. Well, was it a kite? That wasn't my doing, Wendell replied. What was it then? I don't know, Wendell said, his smile disappearing. Better not to ask, eh? But I want to know, Harvey insisted, turning to Mrs. Griffin. It had wings, and I think it flew off the roof. Then it was a bat, Mrs. Griffin said. No, this was 100 times bigger than a bat. He spread his arms. Great, dark wings. Mrs. Griffin frowned as Harvey spoke. You imagined it, she said. I did not, Harvey protested. Why don't you just sit down and eat, Mrs. Griffin replied. If it wasn't a bat, then it wasn't anything at all. But Wendell saw it too, didn't you, Wendell? He looked around at the other boy, who was digging into a steaming plate of turkey and cranberry sauce. Who cares? Wendell said, chewing as he spoke. Just tell her you saw it. Wendell shrugged. Maybe I did, and maybe I didn't. It's Halloween night. There's supposed to be boogeymen out there. But not real ones, said Harvey. A trick's one thing, but if that beast was real... As he spoke, he realized he was breaking the rule he'd made on the porch. Whether the winged creature was real or not didn't matter. This was a place of illusions. Wouldn't he be happier here if he just stopped questioning what was real and what wasn't? Sit down and eat, Mrs. Griffin said again. Harvey shook his head. His appetite had disappeared. He was angry, though he wasn't quite sure at whom. Maybe at Wendell, for his shrugs, or at Mrs. Griffin for not believing him, or at himself for being afraid of illusions. Maybe all three. I'm going up to my room to change, he said, and left the kitchen. He discovered Lulu on the landing, staring out the window. Wind gusted against the glass, reminding Harvey of Rictus's first visit. It wasn't rain the gusts were bringing, however. It was powdery snow. It'll be Christmas soon, she said. Will it? There'll be presents for everyone. There always are. You should wish for something. Is that what you're doing? She shook her head. No, she said. I've been here so long I've got everything I ever wanted. Would you like to see? Harvey said yes, and she led him up the stairs to her room, which was immense and filled with her treasures. She obviously had a passion for boxes. Tiny jeweled boxes, large carved boxes, a box for her collection of glass balls, a box that played tinkling music, a box into which 100 smaller boxes fitted. She also had several families of dolls, who sat in blank-faced rows around the walls. But more impressive by far was the house from which the dolls had been exiled. It stood in the middle of the room, 5 feet high from step to chimney top, every detail of brick, slate, and sill perfect. This is where I keep my friends, Lulu said, and opened the front door. 2 bright green lizards came out to greet her, scurrying up her arms onto her shoulders. The rest are inside, she said. Take a look. Harvey peered through the windows and found that every perfect room in the house was occupied. There were lizards lounging on the bed, lizards snoozing in the baths, lizards swinging from the chandeliers. He laughed out loud at their antics. Aren't they fun? Lulu said. Great, he replied. You can come up and play with them any time you want. Thanks. They're really very friendly. They only bite when they're hungry. Here. She plucked one off her shoulder and dropped it into Harvey's hands. It promptly ran up and perched on his head, much to Lulu's amusement. They enjoyed the company of both the lizards and each other for a long while, until Harvey caught a glimpse of his reflection in one of the windows and remembered what a sight he was. "I'd better go and wash," he told Lulu. "I'll see you later." She smiled at him. "I like you, Harvey Swick," she said. Her honesty made him honest. "I like you too," he told her. Then, his expression darkening, he said, "I wouldn't want anything to happen to you." She looked puzzled. "I saw you at the lake," he said. "Did you?" she replied. "I don't remember." "Well, anyway, it's deep. You should be careful. You could slip and fall in." "I'll be careful," she said as he opened the door. "Oh, and Harvey?" "Yes?" "Don't forget to wish for something." "What shall I ask for?" he wondered as he washed the dirt off his face. Something impossible, maybe, to see just how much magic the house possessed. A white tiger, perhaps. A full-sized Zeppelin. A ticket to the moon. The answer came from the depths of his memory. He'd wished for a present he'd been given and lost a long time ago. A present that his father had made for him, which Mr. Hood, however much he might want to please his new guest, would never be able to duplicate. "The Ark," he murmured. With his face washed and the scratches he'd got from the thorns in the thicket worn like war
all
wounds,
broken up.
he headed back downstairs to find
I'll
that
be
once
right
again the
back,
house
though.
had performed an extraordinary
I gotta go
transformation.
wash my hands
A
now.
Christmas tree, so tall that the star at its summit pricked the ceiling, stood in the hallway, the colors of its twinkling lights seeping into every room.
I'll be right
There
back.
was a smell of chocolate in the air and the sound of carols being sung. In the living room, Mrs. Griffin was sitting beside a roaring fire, with Stewcat purring on her lap. "Wendell's gone outside," she told Harvey. "There's a scarf and gloves for you by the front door." Harvey went out onto the porch. The wind was icy, but it was already clearing the snow clouds, leaving the stars to shine down on a perfect white carpet. Not quite perfect. A trail of tracks led down from the house to the spot where Wendell was building a snowman. "Coming out?" he hollered to Harvey, his voice as clear as the bells that were ringing through the crisp air. Harvey shook his head. He was so tired, even the snow looked comfortable. "Maybe tomorrow," he said. "It'll be back tomorrow, won't it?" "Of course," Wendell yelled. "And the night after, and the night after." Harvey went back inside to look at the Christmas tree. Its branches were hung with strings of popcorn and cranberries, with colored lights and baubles and soldiers in gleaming silver uniforms. "There's something under there for you," Mrs. Griffin said, standing at the living room door. "I hope it's what you want, sweet." Harvey knelt down and pulled a parcel with his name on it out from under the tree. His pulse quickened before he even opened it, because he knew from its shape and from the way it rattled that his wish had been answered. He pulled at the string, remembering as he did so how much littler his hands had been the first time he'd held this gift. The paper tore and fell away, and there, shiny and new, was a painted wooden ark. It was a perfect copy of the one his father had made. The same yellow hull, the same orange prow, the same wheelhouse with holes in its red roof for the giraffes to put their heads through. The same lead animals, all in pairs, snug in the hold or peering through the portholes. 2 dogs, 2 elephants, 2 camels, 2 doves. All these and a dozen more. And finally, the same little Noah with his square white beard and his fat wife, complete with apron. "How did he know?" Harvey murmured. He hadn't intended the question to be heard, much less answered. But Mrs. Griffin said, "Mr. Hood knows every dream in your head." "But this is perfect," Harvey said in amazement. "Look, my dad ran out of blue paint when he was finishing the elephants, so one of them has blue eyes and the other one has green eyes. It's the same. It's exactly the same." "Does it please you then?" Mrs. Griffin asked. Harvey said it did, but that wasn't entirely the truth. It was eerie to have the Ark back in his hands when he knew the real one had been lost, as though time had been turned on its heels and he was a little kid again. He heard Wendell stamping the snow off his feet at the front door, and was suddenly embarrassed to have such a childish present in his hands. He gathered it up in its wrapping and hurried away upstairs, intending to head back down for some supper. But his bed looked too welcoming to be refused, and his stomach quite full enough for one night. So instead he closed the curtains on the gusty night and laid his head down on his pillow. The Christmas bells were still ringing in some distant steeple, and their repetition lulled him into sleep.
I'm back.
He dreamed that he was standing on the steps of his house, looking through the open door into its warm heart. Then the wind caught hold of him, turning him from the threshold, and carrying him away into a dream.
I filled it up almost all the way. It was real sweet.
Chapter
From a
8,
container like this.
Hungry Water. That first day in the holiday house, with all its seasons and its spectacles, set the pattern for the many that were to follow.
But it fills it up.
When Harvey woke the following morning, the sun was once again pouring through a crack in the curtains, but this time it lay in a warm pool on the pillow beside him. He sat up with a shout and a smile, and either one or the other, and sometimes both, remained on his lips for the rest of the day. There was plenty to do. Work on the treehouse in the spring morning, followed by food and the laying of plans for the afternoon. Games and lazy hours in the heat of summer. Sometimes with Wendell, sometimes with Lulu. Then adventures by the light of a harvest moon. And finally, when the winter wind had blown out the flames in the pumpkin heads and carpeted the grounds with snow, chilly fun for them all out in the frosty air, and a warm Christmas welcome when they were done. It was a day of holidays, the third as fine as the second, and the fourth as fine as the third, and very soon Harvey began to forget that there was a dull world out beyond the wall, where the great beast February was still sleeping its tedious sleep. His only real reminder of the life he'd left, besides a second telephone call he made to his mom and dad, just to tell them all was well, was the present he'd wished for and received that first Christmas, his Ark. He thought several times of trying it out on the lake to see if it would float, but it wasn't until the afternoon of the seventh day that he got around to doing so. Wendell had made a real glutton of himself at lunch and had declared that it was far too hot to play. So Harvey wandered down to the lake on his own, with the Ark tucked under his arm. He half expected, hoped in fact, to find Lulu down there to keep him company, but the banks of the lake were empty. Once he laid eyes on the gloomy waters, he almost gave up on the idea of a launching. But that meant admitting something to himself that he didn't wish to admit. So he headed on down to the shore, found a rock to perch on that looked less precarious than the others, and set his Ark on the water. It floated well, he was pleased to see. He pushed it to and fro for a little while, then lifted it out and peered inside to see if it was leaking. It was quite watertight, however, so he set it back on the lake and pushed it out again. As he did so, he caught sight of a fish rising from the bottom of the lake, its mouth wide open, as if it intended to swallow his little vessel whole. He reached out to snatch the Ark from the water before it was either sunk or devoured, but in his haste he lost his footing on the slime-slickened rock, and with a cry, he fell into the lake. The water was icy cold and eager. It quickly closed over his head. He flailed wildly, trying not to imagine the dark depths beneath him, or the vast maw of the fish that had been rising from those depths. Turning his face up toward the surface, he started to swim. He could see his Ark floating above him, capsized by his fall. Its lead passengers were already sinking. He didn't try and save them, but surfaced, gasping for breath, and paddled toward the shore. It wasn't much of a distance. In less than a minute, he was hauling himself up onto the rocks and scrambling away from the bank, water pouring from his sleeves and trousers and shoes. Only when his feet were well clear of the lake and no hungry fish could snap at his toes did he drop down onto the ground. Though it was midsummer, and the sun was blazing somewhere overhead. The air around the lake was cold, and he soon began to shiver. Before he made his way out into the sun, however, he looked for some sign of his ark. The spot where it had sunk was marked by a forlorn flotilla of wreckage, all of which would soon join the rest of the ark at the bottom. Of the fish that had seemed so eager to devour him, there was no sign. Perhaps it had swum down into the depths to chew on the drowned menagerie. If so, Harvey hoped it choked on its dinner. He'd lost plenty of toys before. He'd had a brand new bicycle, his prized possession, stolen from the step of his house 2 birthdays ago. But this loss upset him as much, more in fact. The idea that the lake now had something that he'd owned was somehow worse than a thief running off with his bike. A thief was warm flesh and blood, the lake was not. His possessions had gone into a nightmare place, full of monstrous things, and he felt as though a little part of himself had gone with it, down into the dark. He walked away from the lake without looking back. But the breeze that came to warm his face when he broke through the thicket, and the sound of birds that pleased his ear, could not keep from his mind the thought he'd tried to ignore when he'd gone down to the water. Despite all entertainments that the holiday house supplied so eagerly, it was a haunted place, and however hard he had tried to ignore his doubts and suppress his questions, they could be ignored and suppressed no longer. Whoever, or whatever, that haunter was, Harvey could not be content now until he'd seen its face and knew its nature. Chapter 9. What do you dream? Harvey didn't mention what had happened at the lake to anyone, not even Lulu, in part because he felt stupid for falling in, and in part because the house tried so hard to please him in the days that followed that he almost forgot about the accident entirely. That very night, in fact, he found a piece of colored string with his name tag on it at the base of the Christmas tree, and followed it through the house to find a new bike, even more splendid than the one he'd lost 2 years before, waiting for him. But that was just the first of many fine surprises the holiday house sprang in quick succession. One morning, for instance, Wendell and Harvey climbed up into the treehouse to discover that the branches around it were swarming with parrots and monkeys. Another day, in the middle of Thanksgiving dinner, Mrs. Griffin called them through into the living room, where the flames of the fire had taken on the shapes of dragons and heroes and were doing fiery battle in the grate. And in the heat of one lazy afternoon, Harvey was wakened from a doze by a chorus of shouts and found a troupe of mechanical acrobats performing clockwork-defying feats on the lawn. The greatest surprise, however, began with the appearance of one of Rictus's siblings. "My name is Jive," he said, stepping out of the early morning murk at the top of the stairs. Every muscle in his body seemed to be in motion, ticks, jigs, and jitterings that had wasted him away until he barely cast a shadow. Even his hair, which was a mass of oiled curls, seemed to hear some crazed rhythm. It writhed on his scalp in a knotted frenzy. "Brother Rictus sent me along to see how you're doing," he said, his tone succulent. "I'm doing fine," Harvey replied. "Did you say Brother Rictus?" "We're from the same brood, loosely speaking," Jive said. "I hope you call your family now and then." "Yep," said Harvey. "I called them yesterday." "Are they missing you?" "Didn't sound like it." "Are you missing them?" Harvey shrugged. "Not really," he said. This wasn't strictly true. He had his homesick days, but he knew if he went back home, he'd be in school the day after, and wishing he'd stayed in the holiday house a while longer. "You're going to make the most of being here, then?" said Jive, practicing a weird little dance step up and down the stairs. "Yeah," said Harvey. "I just want to have fun." "Who doesn't?" Jive grinned. "Who doesn't?" He sidled up to Harvey and whispered, "Speaking of fun..." "What?" said Harvey. "You never did get Wendell back for that trick of his." "No, I didn't," said Harvey. "Why the heck not?" "I could never think of a way." "Oh, I'm sure we could cook something up between the two of us," Jive replied mischievously. "It has to be something he'll never think of," Harvey said. That shouldn't be difficult, said Jive. Tell me, what's your favorite monster? Harvey didn't have to think hard about that. A vampire, he said with a grin. I found this great mask. Masks are a good beginning, Jive said. But vampires need to swoop out of the mist. He spread his arms, curling his long fingers like the claws of some eye-gouging beast. Swoop down, snatch up their prey, then rise up again, up against the moon. I can see it now. So can I, said Harvey. But I'm not a bat. So how do I swoop? Ah, said Jive. We'll have Mar work on that for us.
Right back.
After all, what's a Halloween without a transformation or two? He consulted the grandfather clock on the landing. We've still got time to do it tonight. You go down and tell Wendell you'll meet him outside. I'll go up onto the roof and find Mar. You'll meet us up there. I've never been up on the roof. There's a door on the top landing. I'll see you up there in a few minutes. I'll have to get my mask and coat and stuff. You won't need a mask tonight, Jive said. Trust me. Now, you hurry up. Time's a-wasting. It took Harvey only a minute or two to tell Wendell to go on ahead. He was sure Wendell suspected something and was probably preparing some counterattack. But Harvey knew he and Jive had something up their sleeves even Wendell, expert on shock tactics though he was, couldn't anticipate. With the first part of the plan laid, he hurried upstairs again, found the door Jive had mentioned, and climbed up onto the roof. Heights had never bothered him. He liked to be up above the world, looking down on it. Over here, Jive called to him, and Harvey took off along the narrow walkways and up the steep roofs to where his fellow conspirator stood. Sure-footed, Jive observed. No problem. How about flying? Said a third voice, as its owner stepped from the shadows of a chimney. This is Mar, Jive said, another of our little family. Unlike Jive, who looked nimble enough to walk on the eaves if the wind took him, Mar seemed to have slug blood in her somewhere. Harvey almost expected to see her fingers leave silver trails on the brick she touched, or see soft horns appear from her balding head. She was grossly fat, her flesh barely clinging to her bones. Wherever it could, around her mouth and eyes, at her neck and wrists, it collapsed in clammy folds. She reached out and poked Harvey. I said, what about flying? What about it? Harvey said, pushing her hand away. Done much? I flew to Florida once. She doesn't mean in a plane, Jive told her. Oh. In dreams, maybe? Said Mar. Oh, yeah, I dream about flying. That's good, Mar replied, grinning with satisfaction. She had not a single tooth in her mouth. Harvey stared at the empty maw in disgust. You're wondering where they've gone, aren't you? She said to Harvey. Go on, admit it. Harvey shrugged. Well, yes, I am. Karna took them, the thieving brute. I had fine teeth, beautiful teeth. Who's Karna? Harvey wanted to know. Never mind, Jive said, hushing Mar before she could reply. Get to it, or he'll miss the moment. Mar muttered something beneath her breath, then said, Come to me, boy, extending her arms in Harvey's direction. Her touch was icy. Feels weird, huh? Said Jive, as Mar's fingers floated over his face, brushing it here and there. Don't worry, she knows what she's doing. And what's that? Changing you. Into what? You tell her, Jive said. It won't last long, so enjoy it. Go on, tell her about being a vampire. That's what I want Wendell to see, Harvey said. A vampire, Mar said softly, her fingers pressing harder against his skin. Yeah, I want to have fangs like a wolf, and a red throat, and white skin like I've been dead for 1,000 years. 2,000, said Jive. 10,000, said Harvey, beginning to enjoy the game. And crazy eyes that can see in the dark, and pointy ears like a bat's ears. Wait up, Mar said. I've got to get all this right. Her fingers were working hard upon him now, as though his flesh was clay, and she was molding it. His face was tingling, and he wanted to reach up and touch it, but he was afraid of spoiling her handiwork. And there's got to be fur, Jive observed. Sleek, black fur on his neck. Mar's hands dabbled at his throat, and he felt fur sprouting where she touched him. And the wings, Harvey said. Don't forget the wings. Never, said Jive. Spread your arms, boy, Mar told him. He did so, and she ran her hands along them, smiling now. It's good, she said. It's good. He looked down at himself. To his astonishment, he found his fingers were gnarled and sharp, and leathery flaps were hanging from his arms. The wind gusted against them, threatening to carry him off the roof then and there. You know you're playing a dangerous game, don't you? Mar said, as she stood back to admire her handiwork. You'll either break your head or scare the life out of your friend Wendell, or both. He won't fall, woman, Jive said. He's got the knack of this. I can tell just by looking at him. He peered at Harvey with his squinty eyes. Wouldn't be surprised if you weren't a vampire in another life, boy, he said. Vampires don't have other lives, Harvey said, the words more difficult to say with a mouthful of fangs. They live forever. That's right, said Jive, snapping his fingers. So they do, so they do. Well, I'm finished, said Mar. You can get going, boy. The wind came gusting again, and if Jive hadn't been holding on to him as they walked the edge of the roof, Harvey would surely have been carried away. There's your friend, Jive whispered, pointing down into the shadows. Much to his amazement, Harvey found that he could see Wendell quite clearly, even though it was pitch dark in the thicket. He could hear him, too, every little breath, every beat of his heart. This is it, Jive hissed, putting his hand on Harvey's back. What do I do? Harvey said. Do I flap or what? Jump, Jive said. The wind will take care of the rest, either the wind or gravity. And with that, he shoved Harvey off the edge of the roof and into the empty air. Chapter 10. Falling from Grace. The wind wasn't there to bear him up. He plummeted like a slate tossed from the gables, a cry of sheer terror escaping his throat. He saw Wendell turn, saw a look of mortal fear come onto his face. Then the wind came out of nowhere, cold and strong. And just as his legs brushed the bushes, he felt himself lifted up and up toward the sky. His cry became a whoop, his terror joy. The moon was larger than he'd ever seen it, and its vast white face filled his sight, like the face of his mother, bending to kiss him goodnight. Except that he needed no sleep tonight, no, nor a mother to wish him sweet dreams. This was better than any dream, flying with the wind in his wings, and the world shuddering below in fear of his shadow. He looked for Wendell again, and saw him fleeing for the safety of the house. No, you don't, he thought, and fuming his wings like leathery sails, he swooped down on his prey. A blood-curdling shriek filled his ears, and for a moment he thought it was the wind. Then he realized it was his own throat that was uttering this inhuman din, and the shriek became laughter, wild, lunatic laughter. Don't, please, don't! Wendell was sobbing as he ran. Somebody help me! Somebody help me! Harvey knew he'd already had his revenge. Wendell was frightened out of his wits. But it was too much fun to stop now. He liked the feel of the wind beneath him and the cold moon on his back. He liked the sharpness of his eyes and the strength of his claws. But most of all, he liked the fear he was causing, liked the look on Wendell's upturned face and the sound of panic in his chest. The wind was carrying him down into the thicket, and as he landed, Wendell dropped to his knees, begging for mercy. Don't kill me, please, please, I beg you, don't kill me. Harvey had seen and heard enough. He'd had his revenge. It was time to put an end to the game before the fun soured. He opened his mouth to announce himself, but Wendell, seeing the red throat and the wolfish fangs, and thinking this meant certain death, began a new round of supplications. This time, however, he wasn't simply begging. "I'm too fat to eat," he said. "But there's another kid around here somewhere." Harvey growled at this. "There is," Wendell said. "I swear, and there's more meat on him than on me." "Listen to the child," said a voice in the bushes at Harvey's side. He glanced around. There was Jive, his wiry form barely visible among the barbs. "He'd see you dead, young Harvey." Wendell heard none of this. He was still advertising the edibility of his friend, hoisting up his shirt and shaking his blubbery belly to prove how unpalatable he was. "You don't want me," he sobbed. "Take Harvey, take Harvey." "Bite him," said Jive. "Go on, drink a little of his blood. Why not? The fat's no good, but the blood's hot. The blood's tasty." He was doing a little dance as he spoke, stamping his feet to the rhythm of his chant. "Don't waste the taste. Go eat the meat." And still Wendell whined, all snot and tears. "You don't want me? Find Harvey, find Harvey." And the more he sobbed, the more Jive's chant made sense to Harvey. Who was this ridiculous boy, Wendell, anyway? He was too eager to serve Harvey up as dinner to be called a friend. He was just a tasty morsel. Any vampire worth his wings would chew off his head as soon as look at him. And yet, what are you waiting for? Jive wanted to know. We've gone to all this trouble to make a monster of you. Yes, but it's a game, Harvey said. A game? Said Jive. No, no, boy. It's more than that. It's an education. Harvey didn't know what he meant by this, and he wasn't altogether certain he wanted to know. If you don't pounce soon, Jive hissed, you're going to lose him. It was true. Wendell's tears were clearing, and he was staring at his attacker with a puzzled look. Are you going to let me go? He murmured. Harvey felt Jive's hand on his back. Do it, Jive said. Harvey looked at Wendell's tear-stained face and trembling hands. If the situation had been reversed, he thought to himself, would I have been much braver? The answer, he knew, was no. It's now or never, said Jive. Then it's never, Harvey said. Never! The word came out as a guttural roar, and Wendell fled before it, yelling at the top of his voice. Harvey didn't give chase. You disappoint me, boy, Jive said. I thought you had the killer instinct. Well, I don't, said Harvey, a little ashamed of himself. He felt like a coward, even though he knew he'd done the right thing. That was a waste of magic, said another voice, and Mar appeared from out of the bushes, her arms filled with enormous fungi. Where'd you find those? Jive said. Usual place, Mar replied. She gave Harvey a contemptuous look. I suppose you want your old body back, she said.
Right,
yes, please.
That's what it sounds like, huh?
We should leave him like this, said Jive. He'd get around to sucking blood sooner or later. No, said Mar. There's only so much magic to go around. You know that. Why waste it on a miserable little punk like this? She waved her hand casually in Harvey's direction, and he felt the power that had filled his limbs and transformed his face drain out of him. It was a relief, of course, to feel the magic unmade, but a little part of him mourned the loss. In a matter of moments, he was once again an earthbound boy, wingless and weak. With the spell removed, Mar turned her back on him and waddled off into the darkness. Jive, however, lingered long enough to have one last dig at Harvey. You missed your chance there, kiddo, he said. You could have been one of the greats. It was a trick, that's all, Harvey said, concealing the strange unhappiness he felt. A Halloween trick. It meant nothing. There are those who disagree, Jive said darkly. Those who'd say that all the great powers in the world are bloodsuckers and soul stealers at heart, and we must serve them, all of us, serve them to our dying day. He stared hard at Harvey all the way through this peculiar little speech, and then, with a nimble step, retreated into the shadows and was gone. Harvey found Wendell in the kitchen, a hot dog in one hand and a cookie in the other, telling Mrs. Griffin about what he'd seen. He dropped his food when Harvey came in and yelped with relief. "You're alive! You're alive!" "Of course I'm alive," said Harvey. "Why shouldn't I be?" "There was something out there, a terrible beast. It almost ate me. I thought maybe it had eaten you." Harvey looked down at his hands and legs. "Nope," he said. "Not a nibble." "I'm glad," Wendell said. "I'm so, so glad. You're my best friend for always." "I was vampire food 5 minutes ago," Harvey thought, but he said nothing. Maybe there'd come a time when he could tell Wendell about his transformation and temptation, but this wasn't it. He simply said, "I'm hungry," and sat down at the table beside his fair-weather friend to put something sweeter than blood in his belly. Chapter 11. Turnabout. Neither Wendell nor Lulu was around the following day. Mrs. Griffin said she'd seen them both before breakfast, and then they disappeared. So Harvey was left to his own devices. He tried not to think about what had happened the night before, but he couldn't help himself. Snatches of conversation kept coming back, and he puzzled over them all day long. What had Jive meant, for instance, when he told Harvey that turning him into a vampire was not so much a game as an education? What kind of lesson had he learned by jumping off a roof and scaring Wendell? And all that stuff about soul stealers and how they had to be served. What had that meant? Was it Mr. Hood that Jive had been speaking of? That great power they all had to serve? If Hood was somewhere in the house, why hadn't anyone, Lulu, Wendell, or himself, encountered him? Harvey had quizzed his friends about Hood and had the same story from them both. They'd heard no footfalls, no whispers, no laughter. If Mr. Hood was indeed here, where was he hiding, and why? So many questions, so few answers. And then, if these mysteries weren't enough, another came along to vex him. In the late afternoon, lounging in the shade of the treehouse, he heard a yell of frustration and peered through the leaves to see Wendell racing across the lawn. He was dressed in a windbreaker and boots, even though it was swelteringly hot, and he was stamping around like a madman. Harvey shouted to him, but his call went either unheard or ignored. So he climbed down and pursued Wendell around the side of the house. He found him in the orchard, red-faced and sweaty. "What's going on?" he said. "I can't get out," Wendell said, grinding a half-rotted apple underfoot. "I want to leave, Harvey, but there's no way out." "Of course there is." "I've been trying for hours and hours, and I tell you, the mist keeps sending me back the way I came." "Hey, calm down." "I want to go home, Harvey," Wendell said, close to tears now. "Last night was too much for me. That thing came after my blood. I know you don't believe me." "I do," said Harvey. "Honest, I do." "You do?" "For sure." "Well, then maybe you should leave too, because if I go, it'll come after you." "I don't think so," said Harvey. "I've been kidding myself about this place," Wendell said. "It's dangerous. Oh, yeah, I know it seems like everything's perfect, but..." Harvey interrupted him. "Maybe you should keep your voice down," he said. "We should talk about this quietly, in private." "Like where?" said Wendell, wild-eyed. "The whole place is watching us and listening to us. Don't you feel it?" "Why would it do that?" "I don't know," Wendell snapped. "But last night I thought, if I don't leave, I'm going to die here. I'll just disappear one night, or go crazy like Lulu." He dropped his voice to a whisper. "We're not the first, you know. What about all the clothes upstairs? All the coats and shoes and hats? They belonged to kids like us." Harvey shuddered. Had he played trick or treat in a murdered boy's shoes? I want to get out of here, Wendell said, tears running down his face. But there's no way out.
Nice.
If there's a
That's
way
an
in,
old one
there
there.
must be a way out.
I remember that
Harvey
one.
reasoned. We'll go to the wall. With that, he marched off, Wendell in tow, around to the front of the house and down the gentle slope of the lawn. The mist wall looked perfectly harmless as they approached it. Be careful, Wendell warned. It's got some tricks up its sleeve. Harvey slowed his step, expecting the wall to twitch or even to reach for him. But it did nothing. Bolder now, he strode into the mist, fully expecting to emerge on the other side. But by some trick or other, he was turned around without even being aware of it and delivered out of the wall with the house in front of him. What happened? He said to himself. Puzzled, he stepped back into the mist.
It's been a little bit since I've
The
seen that
same
one.
thing occurred. In he went, and out he came again, facing the opposite direction. He tried again, and again, and again, but the same trick was worked upon him every time, until Harvey was as frustrated as Wendell had been a half hour before. Now do you believe me? Wendell said. Yeah. So what do we do? Well, we don't yell about it, Harvey whispered. We just get on with the day. Pretend we've given up leaving. I'm going to do a little looking around. He began his investigations as soon as they got back into the house, by going in search of Lulu. Her bedroom door was closed. He knocked, then called her. There was no reply, so he tried the handle. The door was unlocked. Lulu, he called. It's Harvey. She wasn't there, but he was relieved to see that her bed had been slept in, and that she'd apparently been playing with her pets recently. The doors to the doll's house were open, and the lizards were everywhere underfoot. There was one strangeness, however. The sound of running water led him through to the bathroom, where he found the bath full almost to brimming, and Lulu's clothes scattered in the puddles on the tile. Have you seen Lulu? He asked Mrs. Griffin when he got downstairs. Not in the last few hours, she replied, but she's been keeping to herself. Mrs. Griffin looked hard at Harvey. I wouldn't pay too much mind if I were you, child, she said. Mr. Hood doesn't like inquisitive guests. I was only wondering where she'd got to, Harvey said. Mrs. Griffin frowned, her tongue working against her pale cheek as though it wanted to speak, but didn't dare. Anyway, Harvey went on, deliberately goading Mrs. Griffin. I don't believe Mr. Hood exists. Now you be careful, she said, her voice and frown deepening. You don't want to talk about Mr. Hood that way. I've been here days and days, Harvey said, realizing as he spoke that he'd lost count of his time in the house. And I haven't seen him once. Where is he? Now Mrs. Griffin came at Harvey with her hands raised, and for a moment he thought she was going to strike him. But instead, she took hold of his shoulders and shook him. Please, child, she said, be content with what you know. You're here to enjoy yourself for a little time. And, child, it's such a little time. It flies by. Oh, Lord, how it flies. It's just a few weeks, Harvey said. I'm not going to stay here forever. Now it was he who stared at her. Or am I? He said. Stop, she told him. You think I am here forever, don't you? He said, shaking off her grip. What is this place, Mrs. Griffin? Is it some kind of prison? She shook her head. Don't tell me lies, he said. It's stupid. We're locked up in here, aren't we? Now, though she was shaking with fear from head to foot, she dared to make a tiny nod of her head. All of us? He asked. Again she nodded. You too? Yes, she whispered. Me too. And there's no way out. Believe me, if you try to escape again, Karna will come after you. Karna, he said, remembering the name from the conversation between Jive and Mar. He's up there, Mrs. Griffin said, on the roof. That's where the four of them live. Rictus, Mar, Karna, and Jive. You know. I've met them all but Karna." "Pray you never do," said Mrs. Griffin. "Now, listen to me, Harvey. I've seen many children come and go through this house, some of them foolish, some of them selfish, some sweet, some brave. But you are one of the brightest souls I have ever set eyes on. I want you to take what joy you can from being here. Use the hours well, because they'll be fewer than you think." Harvey listened patiently to this. Then, when she'd finished, he said, "I still want to meet Mr. Hood." "Mr. Hood is dead," Mrs. Griffin said, exasperated by his persistence. "Dead? You swear?" "I swear," she replied. "On the brave of my poor Clue Cat, I swear. Mr. Hood is dead. So don't ask about him ever again." This was the first time Mrs. Griffin had ever come close to giving Harvey an order, and though he wanted to press her further, he decided not to. Instead, he said he was sorry for bringing up the subject and wouldn't do it again, then left her to her secret sorrows. Chapter 12. What the Flood Gave Up and What It Took. "Well," said Wendell, when Harvey came to his room, "what's the story?" Harvey shrugged. "Everything's fine," he said. "Why don't we just enjoy ourselves while we can?" "Enjoy ourselves?" Wendell said. "How can we enjoy ourselves when we're locked in?" "It's better in here than it is out in the world," Harvey said. Wendell looked at him in astonishment. "That's true, isn't it?" As he spoke, he grabbed hold of Wendell's hand, and Wendell realized there was a ball of paper in Harvey's palm, which he was trying to pass between the two of them. "Maybe you should just find a quiet little corner and do some reading," he said, glancing down at their hands as he spoke. Wendell got the idea. He claimed the balled-up note from Harvey's hand and said, "Maybe I'll do that." "Good," said Harvey. "I'm going to go out and enjoy the sun while I can." That was exactly what he did. He had a lot of planning to do before midnight, which was when the note told Wendell they should meet to make their escape. Surely even the forces that guarded the house had to sleep sometime. The business of keeping the seasons rolling around couldn't be easy, and of all the hours to slip away, midnight seemed the most promising. But he didn't suppose it would be easy. The house had been a trap for decades, perhaps centuries. Who knew how old its evil really was? And even at midnight, it would not be so foolish as to leave the exit wide open. It would have to be quick and clever and not panic or lose their tempers once they were in the mist. The real world was out there somewhere. All they had to do was find it. He knew when he saw Wendell for Halloween that the note had been read and understood. There was a look in Wendell's eyes that said, "I'm ready. I'm nervous, but I'm ready." The rest of the evening passed for the two of them, like the performance of a strange play, in which they were the actors and the house, or whoever haunted it, was the audience. They went about enjoying themselves as though this was a night like any other, heading out to play trick-or-treat with a show of loud laughter, even though they were both shuddering in their borrowed shoes, then coming in to eat their supper and spend what they hoped would be their last Christmas in the house. They opened their presents, a mechanical dog for Wendell, a magician's kit for Harvey, said their good nights to Mrs. Griffin. Goodbye, of course, not good night, but Harvey didn't dare let her know, and then went to bed. The house grew quiet, and quieter still. The snow no longer sighed at the sill, nor the wind in the chimney. It was, Harvey thought, the deepest silence he'd ever heard. So deep that he could hear his heartbeat in his ears, and every rustle of his body against the sheets sounded like a roll of drums. A little before midnight he got up and dressed, moving slowly and carefully, so as to make as little noise as possible. Then he headed out into the passageway, and, slipping like a thief from shadow to shadow, hurried down the stairs and out into the night. He left not by the front door, it was heavy and creaked loudly, but by the kitchen door, which brought him out at the side of the house. Though the wind had dropped, the air was still bitter and the surface of the snow had frozen. It crackled as he walked, however lightly he trod. But he was beginning to hope that the eyes and ears of the house were indeed closed at this hour. If not, why hadn't he been challenged? And he might make it to the perimeter without attracting attention. Just as he was about to turn the corner, however, that sweet hope was soured, as somebody in the murk behind him called his name. He froze in his tracks, hoping the darkness would conceal him. But the voice came again and again called his name. It was not a voice he recognized. Not Wendell, certainly, nor Mrs. Griffin. Not Jai, not Rictus, not Mar. This was a frail voice, the voice of somebody who barely knew how to shape the syllables of his name. R. V. And then, all of a sudden, he knew the voice, and his heart, which had been working overtime since he'd slipped out of bed, grew so loud in his ears it almost drowned out the summons when it came again. Lulu? He murmured. Yeah, said the voice. Where are you? Near, she said. He stared at the thicket, hoping for some glimpse of her, but all he could see was the starlight glittering on the frosted leaves. You're leaving, she said. Her words slurred. Yes, he whispered, and you have to come with us. He took a step toward her, and as he did so, some of the glitter that he thought was frost retreated from him. What was she wearing that shimmered this way? Don't be afraid, he said. I don't want you to look at me, she said. What's wrong? Please, she said, just keep your distance. She retreated even farther from him and seemed to lose her balance as she did so. She dropped to the ground, the thicket around her shaking. Harvey stepped forward to help her up, but she let out such a sob that he stopped in his tracks. I only want to help, he said. You can't help me, she replied, every word pained. It's too late. You just have to go while you still can. I just wanted to give you something to remember me by. He saw her move in the shadows, reaching out in his direction. Look away, she said. He turned his head away from her. Now close your eyes and promise you won't open them. He dutifully closed his eyes. I promise, he said. And now he heard her moving toward him, her breath laborious. Open your hand, she said. Her voice was near now. He knew if he opened his eyes, he'd be face to face with her. But he had made a promise and was determined to keep it. He put out his hand and felt first one, then two, then three heavy little objects, cold and wet, dropped into his cupped palm. This was all I could find, Lulu said. I'm sorry. Can I look? He asked. Not yet. Let me leave first. He closed his fingers around the gifts she'd given him, trying to make sense of them by touch. What were they? Pieces of frozen stone? No, they were carved. He could feel grooves on one, a head on another. And now, of course, he knew what he held. 3 survivors of his ark, dredged up from the depths of the lake. The answer was no comfort to him, quite the reverse. He shuddered as he put the puzzle of Lulu's silvery gleam together with the knowledge of what he held. She had swum down to the bottom of the lake to recover these figures, a descent that was beyond the capacity of any land dweller. No wonder she'd retreated into the shadows, ordering him not to look at her. She wasn't human any longer. She was becoming or had already become, a sister to the strange fish that circled in these dark waters, cold-blooded and silver-skinned. "Oh, Lulu," he said, "how did this happen?" "Don't waste your time with me," she murmured. "Just go while you've a chance." "I want to help," he said. "You can," came the reply. "Can't help me. I've been here too long. My life is over." "That's not true," Harvey said. "We're the same age." "But I've been here so long, I don't even remember." Her voice trailed away. "Don't remember what?" "Maybe I just don't want to remember," she said. "It'll hurt too much." She made a long, choked sigh. "You have to go," she said in a whisper. "Go while you still can." "I'm not afraid." "Then you're stupid," she said. "Because you should be." He heard the thicket shake as she started to retreat from him. "Wait," he said. She made no reply. "Lulu!" The din of her departure grew louder. By the sound of it, she was almost throwing herself out of his range. Breaking his promise, he opened his eyes and caught a glimpse of her as she fled. A shadow in the shadows, no more. He started after her, not knowing what he would say or do when he caught up with her, but knowing he'd never forgive himself if he didn't somehow help. Maybe if he persuaded her to go with him, out of the shadow of the house, its vicious magic would be undone. Or maybe he could find some doctor for her in the outside world who could cure her of this malformation. Anything rather than leaving her to return to the lake. Its waters were in view now, gleaming darkly between the branches of the thicket. Lulu had reached the bank, and for a moment the meager starlight found her. All that Harvey had feared was true, and more. A fin grew from her bent and scaly back, and her legs had almost fused together. Her arms had become short and stubby, her fingers webbed. But it was her face, glimpsed as she turned back to look at him, that was the greatest shock. Her hair had fallen out, and her nose disappeared. Her mouth had lost its lips, and her blue eyes turned to swiveling silver balls, lidless and lashless. And yet, despite their freakishness, there was human feeling in those eyes, and on that mouth, a terrible sadness that he knew would never leave his heart if he lived to be 1,000. "You were my friend," she said, as she teetered on the bank. "Thank you for that." Then she tumbled into the water. He went to the edge of the lake at a dash, but by the time he reached the place from which she dived, the ripples were disappearing and the bubbles breaking. He watched the icy waters for a minute or more, hoping she would see him and surface. But she'd gone where he couldn't follow. And that, it seemed, was the end of it. Clutching her gifts to him like talismans, he trudged away from the lake and down the lawn to keep his rendezvous with Wendell. Chapter 13. The fourth part of darkness. "What happened to you?" Wendell whispered, when Harvey reached the bottom of the lawn. "I thought we were meeting at midnight." "I got waylaid," Harvey said. He'd intended to tell Wendell what had just transpired, but his friend was obviously nervous enough without being told about Lulu's fate. Harvey slipped the 3 survivors of the Ark into his pocket, and resolved only to speak of the encounter when he and Wendell were safely away from this terrible place. Just one thing stood between them and that ambition: the wall of mist. Now, as ever, it seemed innocent enough. But that was an illusion, of course, like so many things in Mr. Hood's kingdom. "We have to be very organized about this," Harvey said to Wendell. "Once we're in the wall, we lose our sense of direction. So we have to be sure we keep walking in a straight line and not let the mist turn us around. Well, how do we do that? Said Wendell. I think one of us should go in first, and the other one keep hold of his hand. Me, said Wendell eagerly. I want to be first. No problem. Then I'll keep my back to the house and keep guiding you. Who knows, maybe the wall's so thin you'll just be able to pull me through. We can hope, Wendell said. Are you ready? Harvey asked, extending his hand. Wendell took it. Whenever you are, he said. And let's get out of here. Wendell nodded and stepped into the mist. Instantly, Harvey felt his grip tighten. Don't let go, Wendell said, his voice already remote, although he was just a pace away. Just keep walking, Harvey said, as they reached arm's length. Any sign of... Before he could finish his question, a noise from the house behind him sealed his lips. He glanced back. The front door was open, and a light was burning in the hall, throwing into silhouette the figure rushing down the porch steps. It was Mrs. Griffin. The noise he'd heard was not from her lips, however. Nothing human could make such a din. He saw Mrs. Griffin glance up toward the roof as she hurried down the lawn, and following her gaze, saw the noisemaker rising against the stars. He knew its name, even though he couldn't see its face. Hood had 4 servants, and he'd met only 3, Rictus, Jive, and Mar. Here was the 4th. Karna, the tooth stealer. Karna, the devourer. Karna, the beast Mrs. Griffin had hoped Harvey would never meet. Back to the house, child, Mrs. Griffin yelled, as the din of vast wings filled the air. Quickly, quickly! Harvey pulled on Wendell's arm, yelling to him as he did so, but Wendell had a whiff of freedom in his nostrils and wasn't about to give it up. What are you waiting for? Mrs. Griffin yelled. Get away from there, or it'll take off your head. Harvey glanced up at the swooping beast and knew this was no lie. Karna's jaws were wide enough to snap him in half with a single bite, but he couldn't leave Wendell in the mist. They'd begun this adventure together, and that was how they would finish it, dead or alive. He had no choice but to step into the mist himself and hope that Wendell had snatched a glimpse of the world outside and could pull him through to the street. As he took that step, he heard Mrs. Griffin say something about leading the way. Then he was blinded by the chill of the mist, and the sound of her voice became a garbled whisper. Karna's shrieks were not so hushed, however. They pierced the murk, skewering Harvey's thoughts the way its teeth would skewer his head if the beast caught up with him. Wendell, Harvey yelled, it's coming for us! He caught a glimpse of a figure up ahead of him, then of Wendell's face, smeared by the mist, turning to say, There's no way out. There has to be. I can't find it, Wendell said, his reply almost drowned out by the din of Karna's shrieks. Harvey glanced back the way he'd come, more afraid not to know how close the creature was than to see it, however terrifying the sight. A veil of mist swirled in front of him, but he glimpsed Karna's form as the beast descended. It was the most monstrous of the brood. Its skin rotted and stretched over barbed and polished bone, its throat a nest of snaky tongues, its jaws set with hundreds of teeth. This is the end, Harvey thought. I've only been alive 10 years and 5 months, and I'm going to have my head bitten off. Then, from the corner of his eye, a strange sight. Mrs. Griffin's arms reaching into the mist and dropping Blue Cat to the ground. He's got a good sense of direction, Harvey heard her say. Follow him, follow him. He didn't need a second invitation, nor did Blue Cat. Tail up, it padded off, and Harvey hauled on Wendell's arm to drag him in pursuit. The cat was quick, but so was Harvey. He kept his eyes glued on that bright tail, even when the rush of wings behind him announced that Karna had entered the mist and was almost upon them. 2 strides, 3 strides, 4, and now the mist seemed to be thinning. He heard Wendell whooping for joy. The street, he yelled. I see it. And the next moment Harvey saw it too. The sidewalks wet with rain and shining in the lamplight. Now he dared look back, and there was Karna, its jaws a yard from them. He let go of Wendell's arm and pushed his friend toward the street, ducking as he did so. Karna's lower jaw scraped his spine, but the beast was moving too fast to check itself. And instead of wheeling around to scoop up its quarry, it flew on, out into the real world. Wendell was already there. Harvey joined him a moment later. "We did it," Wendell yelled. "We did it." "So did Karna," Harvey said, pointing up at the beast as it rose against the cloudy sky and turned to come back for them. "It wants to drive us back inside," Harvey said. "I'm not going," Wendell cried. "Never! I'm never going in there again." Karna heard his defiance. Its blazing eyes fixed on him, and it came down like a thunderbolt. Its shriek echoing through the midnight streets. "Run!" Harvey said. But Karna's stare had rooted Wendell to the spot. Harvey grabbed hold of him and was about to make a run for it when he heard the beast's cry change. Triumph became doubt. Doubt became pain. And suddenly Karna wasn't swooping, but falling. Holes opening in its wings as though a horde of invisible moths was eating at their fabric. It labored to climb the air again, but its wounded wings refused their duty, and seconds later it struck the street so hard it bit off a dozen of its tongues and scattered 100 teeth at the boy's feet. The fall didn't kill it, however. Though agonized by its wounds, it hauled itself up onto the spiky crutches of its wings and began to drag itself back toward the wall. Even now, in this wretched state, it was ferocious, and with snaps to right and left, drove Harvey and Wendell out of its path. "It can't survive out here," Wendell realized aloud. "It's dying." Harvey wished he had some weapon to keep the beast from returning to safety, but he had to be content with the sight of its defeat. If it had not wanted their flesh so badly, he thought, it wouldn't have come after them at such speed and brought this pain and humiliation upon itself. There was a lesson there, if he could only remember it. Evil, however powerful it seemed, could be undone by its own appetite. Then the creature was gone, a curtain of mist drawn over its retreat. There was only one sign remaining of the mysteries that lay on the other side of the wall. The face of Blue Cat, gazing out at the world that he, like all the occupants of the holiday house, could never explore. His azure gaze met Harvey's for a moment. Then he looked back toward his prison, as though he heard Mrs. Griffin's summons, and with a sorrowful sigh, turned and traipsed away. "Weird," said Wendell, as he stared at the rainy streets. "It's as though I never left." "Is it?" said Harvey. He wasn't so sure. He felt different, marked by this adventure. "I wonder if we'll even remember we came here in a week's time." "Oh, I'll remember," Harvey said. "I've got a few souvenirs." He dug into his pocket in search of the figures from the Ark. Even as he pulled them out, he felt them crumbling, as the real world took its toll on them. "Illusion," he murmured, as they turned to dust and ran away between his fingers. "Who cares?" said Wendell. "It's time to go home, and that's no illusion." Chapter 14. Time was. It took the boys an hour to reach the center of town, and there, given that their houses lay in opposite directions, they parted company. They exchanged addresses before they did so, promising to contact each other in a day or two, so that they could each support the other's account of the holiday house. It would be difficult to make people believe all that had happened to them, but perhaps they'd have a better chance if two voices told the same tale. "I know what you did back there," Wendell said just before they parted. "You saved my life." "You would have done the same thing for me," Harvey said. Wendell looked doubtful. "I might have wanted to," he said, somewhat abashed. "But I've never been very brave." "We escaped together," Harvey said. I couldn't have done it without you. Really? Really? Wendell brightened at this. Yeah, he said. I guess that's right. Well, be seeing ya. And with that, they went their separate ways. It was still several hours before daybreak, and the streets were virtually deserted, so for Harvey it was a long, lonely trudge home. He was tired and a little saddened by his farewell to Wendell, but the thought of the welcome he'd get when he reached his own doorstep put a spring in his heels. Several times he wondered if he'd gone astray, because the streets he passed through were unfamiliar. One neighborhood was extremely fancy, the houses and the cars parked outside them slicker than anything he'd set eyes on. Another was virtually a wasteland, the houses half rubble, the streets strewn with garbage. But his sense of direction served him well. As the east began to pale and the birds in the trees started their twitterings, he rounded the corner of his street. His weary legs broke into a joyful dash and brought him to the step panting for breath and ready to fall into his parents' arms. He knocked on the door. There was no sound from the house at first, which didn't surprise him given the hour. He knocked again and again. Finally, a light was turned on, and he heard somebody coming to the door. Who is it? Said his father from behind the closed door. Do you know what time it is? It's me, said Harvey. Then came the sound of bolts being drawn aside, and the door was opened a crack. Who's me? Said the man, peering out at him. He looked kindly enough, Harvey thought, but it wasn't his father. This was a much older man, his hair almost white, his face thin. He had a badly trimmed mustache and a furrow of a frown. What do you want? He said. Before Harvey could reply, a woman's voice said, Come away from the door. He couldn't see the second speaker yet, but he caught a glimpse of the wallpaper in the hallway and the pictures on the wall. To his relief, he saw that this was not his house at all. He'd obviously made a simple mistake and knocked on the wrong door. I'm sorry, he said, backing away. I didn't mean to wake you up. Who are you looking for? The man wanted to know, opening the door a little wider now. Are you one of the Smith kids? He started to dig in the pocket of his dressing gown and brought out a pair of spectacles. He can't even see me properly, Harvey thought. Poor old man. But before the spectacles reached the bridge of the man's nose, his wife appeared behind him, and Harvey's legs almost folded up beneath him at the sight of her. She was old, this woman, her hair almost as colorless as her husband's, and her face even more lined and sorrowful. But Harvey knew that face better than any on earth. It was the first face he'd ever loved. It was his mother. Mom? He murmured. The woman stopped and stared out through the open door at the boy standing on the step, her eyes filling up with tears. She could barely breathe the word she said next. Harvey? Mom? Mom, it is you, isn't it? By now, the man had put on his spectacles and peered through them with his eyes wide. It's not possible, he said flatly. This can't be Harvey. It's him, said his wife. It's our Harvey. He's come home. The man shook his head. After all these years, he said. He'd be a man by now. He'd be a grown man. This is just a boy. It's him, I tell you. No, the man replied, angry now. It's some prank, somebody trying to break our hearts, as if they're not broken enough. He started to slam the door, but Harvey's mom caught hold of him. Look at him, she said. Look at his clothes. That's what he was wearing the night he left us. How do you know? You think I don't remember? It's 31 years ago, said Harvey's father, still staring at the boy on the step. This can't be. He faltered as slow recognition spread over his face. Oh, my lord, he said, his voice dropping to a hoarse whisper. It is him, isn't it? I told you, his wife replied. Are you some kind of ghost? He asked Harvey. Oh, for goodness sake, Harvey's mom said. He's no ghost. She slipped past her husband and out onto the step. I don't know how it's possible, and I don't care, she said, opening her arms to Harvey. All I know is our little boy's come home to us. Harvey couldn't speak. There were too many tears in his throat, and in his nose, and in his eyes. All he could do was stumble into his mother's arms. It was wonderful to feel her hands stroke his hair and her fingers wipe his cheeks. Oh, Harvey, 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 she sobbed. We thought we'd never see you again. She kissed him over and over. We thought you'd gone forever. How's this possible? His father still wanted to know. I kept praying, his mother said. Harvey had another answer, although he didn't voice it. The moment he'd set eyes on his mother, so changed, so sorrowful, it was instantly clear what a terrible trick Hood's house had played upon them all. For every day he'd spent there, a year had gone by here in the real world. Every morning while he'd played in the spring warmth, months had passed. In the afternoon, while he'd lazed in the summer sun, the same. And those haunted twilights, which had seemed so brief, had been another span of months, as had the Christmas nights, full of snow and presents. They'd all slipped by so easily, and though he had only aged a month, his mom and dad had lived in sadness for 31 years, thinking that their little boy was gone forever. That had almost been the case. If he'd remained in the House of Illusions, distracted by its petty pleasures, a whole lifetime would have gone by here in the real world, and his soul would have become Hood's property. He would have joined the fish circling in the lake, and circling and circling. He shuddered at the thought. You're cold, sweetie, his mother said. Let's get you inside. He sniffed hard and cleared his tears with the back of his hand. I'm so tired, he said. I'll make a bed for you straight away. No, I want to tell you what happened before I go to sleep, Harvey replied. It's a long story. 31 years long. Chapter 15. New Nightmares. It was a more difficult tale to tell than he expected it to be. Though some of the details were clear in his head, Rictus's first appearance, the sinking of the Ark, his and Wendell's escape, there was much else he could not properly remember. It was as though the mist he'd strode through had seeped into his head and had there drawn a veil over the house and much of what it contained. I remember speaking to you on the phone 2 or 3 times, he said. You didn't speak to us, honey, his mom replied. Then that was just another trick, Harvey said. I should have known. But who's playing all those tricks? His father demanded. If this house exists, I say if, then whoever owns it kidnapped you and somehow kept you from growing up. Maybe he froze you. No, said Harvey. It was warm there, except when the snow came down, of course. There has to be some sane explanation. There is, said Harvey. It was magic. His father shook his head. That's a child's answer, he said. And I'm not a child anymore. And I know what I know, said Harvey firmly. It isn't very much, honey, his mom said. I wish I could remember more. She put a comforting arm around his shoulder. Never mind, she said. We'll talk about it when you've had a rest. Could you find this house again? His father asked him. Yes, Harvey replied, though his skin ran with chills at the thought of going back. I think so. Then that's what we'll do. I don't want him going back to that place, his mother said. We have to know it exists before we report it to the police. You understand that, don't you, son? Harvey nodded. It sounds like something I made up, I know, but it's not. I swear it's not. Come on, sweetie, his mother said. I'm afraid your room's changed a bit, but it's still comfortable. I kept it just as you'd left it for years and years, hoping you'd find your way home. Then I realized if you ever did come back, you'd be a grown man, and you wouldn't want it decorated with rocket ships and parrots. So we had the decorators in. It's completely different now. I don't mind, Harvey said. It's home, and that's all I care about. In the early afternoon, as he slept in his old room, it rained. A hard March rain that beat against the window and slapped on the sill. The sound woke him. He sat up in bed with the hairs at his nape pricking and knew that he'd been dreaming of Lulu. Poor, lost Lulu. Dragging her misshapen body through the bushes, her flipper hand clutching the ark animal she dredged up from the mud. The thought of her unhappiness was unbearable. How could he ever hope to live in the world to which he'd returned, knowing that she remained Hood's prisoner? I'll find you, he murmured to himself. I will, I swear. Then he lay back on the cold pillow and listened to the sound of rain until sleep crept over him. Exhausted by his travels and traumas, he didn't wake again until the following morning. The rain had cleared. It was time to lay plans. I bought a map of the whole of Millsap, his father said, unfolding his purchase and spreading it over the kitchen table. There's our house. He had already marked the place with a cross. Now, do you remember any of the street names around Hood's place? Harvey shook his head. I was too busy escaping, he said. Were there any particular buildings you saw? It was dark and rainy. So, we just have to trust to luck. We'll find it, Harvey said. Even if it takes all week. It was easier said than done. More than 3 decades had passed since he'd first made his way through the town with Rictus, and countless things had changed. There were new plazas and new slums, new cars on the streets and new aircraft overhead. So many distractions, all keeping Harvey from the trail. I don't know which way is which, he admitted, after they'd been searching for half a day. Nothing's the way I remember it. We'll keep going, his father said. It'll all come clear. It didn't. They spent the rest of the day wandering around, hoping that some sight would trigger a memory, but it was frustrating business. Every now and then in some square or street, Harvey would say, maybe this is it, and they'd head off in one direction or another, only to find that the trail grew cold a few blocks on. That evening, his father quizzed him again. If you could only remember what the house looked like, he said, I could describe it to people. It was big, I remember that, and old. I'm sure it was very old. Could you draw it? I could try. He did just that, and though he wasn't much of an artist, his hand seemed to remember more than his brain had, because after a half hour he had drawn the house in considerable detail. His father was pleased. We'll take this with us tomorrow, he said. Maybe somebody will recognize it. But the second day was just as frustrating as the first. Nobody knew the house that Harvey had drawn, nor anything remotely like it. By the end of the afternoon, Harvey's father was getting short-tempered. It's useless, he said. I must have asked 500 people, and not one of them, not one, even vaguely recognized the place. It's not surprising, said Harvey. I don't think anyone who saw the house, besides me and Wendell, ever escaped before. We should just report all this to the police, his mother said, and let them deal with it. And what do we tell them? His father said, raising his voice. That we think there's a house out there that hides in a mist and steals children with magic? It's ridiculous. Calm down, Harvey's mother said. We'll talk about this after we've eaten. They trudged home, ate, and discussed the whole problem again, but without finding any solutions. Mr. Hood had laid his traps carefully over the years, protecting himself from the laws of the real world. Safe behind the mists of his illusion, he'd most likely already found 2 new and unwitting prisoners to replace Harvey and Wendell. It seemed his evil would go on, undiscovered and unpunished. The following day, Harvey's father made an announcement. This search is getting us nowhere, he said. We're going to give it up. Are you going to the police? His wife asked him. Yes, and they'll want Harvey to tell them everything he knows. It's going to be difficult. They won't believe me, Harvey said. That's why I'm going to talk to them first, his father said. I'll find somebody who'll listen. He left soon after breakfast, with a worried expression on his face. This is all my fault, Harvey said to his mom. We lost all that time together just because I was bored. Don't blame yourself, she said. We're all tempted to do things we regret once in a while. Sometimes we choose badly and make mistakes. I just wish I knew how to unmake it, Harvey replied. His mother went out shopping in the middle of the morning and left Harvey haunted by that thought. Was there some way to undo the damage that had been done? To take back the stolen years and live them here with the people who loved him and whom he loved dearly in return? He was sitting at his bedroom window, trying to puzzle the problem out, when he saw a forlorn figure at the street corner. He threw open the window and yelled down to him, "Wendell! Wendell! Over here!" Then he raced downstairs. By the time he opened the door, his friend was on the step, his face red and wet with tears and sweat. "What happened?" he said. "Everything's changed." His words were punctuated by hiccups. "My dad divorced my mom, and my mom's so old, Harvey, and fat as a house." He wiped his running nose with the back of his hand and sniffed hard. "It wasn't supposed to be this way," he said. "Well, was it?" Harvey did his best to explain how the house had deceived them, but Wendell was in no mood for theory. He just wanted the nightmare to be over. "I want things the way they were," he wailed. "My dad's gone to the police," Harvey said. "He's going to tell them everything." "That won't do any good," Wendell said despairingly. "They'll never find the house." "You're right," Harvey said. "I went to look for it with my mom and dad, but it was no use. It's hiding." "Well, it's bound to hide from them, stupid," Wendell said. "It doesn't want grown-ups." "You're right," said Harvey. "It wants children. And I bet it wants you and me more than ever." "How'd you reckon that?" "It almost had us. It almost ate us alive." "So you think it's got a taste for us?" "I'm sure of it." Wendell stared at his feet for a moment. "You think we should go back, don't you?" "I don't think any of those grown-ups, my dad, your mom, the police, are ever going to find the house. If we want all those years back, we have to get them for ourselves." "Well, I don't much like the idea," Wendell confessed. "Neither do I," he said, thinking as he spoke that he'd have to leave a note for his mom and dad, so that they wouldn't think his return had been a dream. "We have to go," he said. "We don't have any choice." "So when do we start?" "Now," said Harvey grimly. "We've lost too much time already." Chapter 16. Back to the Happy Land. It was as if the house knew that they were coming back and was calling to them. As soon as they stepped out into the street, their feet seemed to know the way. All they had to do was let them lead. "What do we do when we get there?" Wendell wanted to know. "I mean, we only just escaped with our lives last time." "Mrs. Griffin will help us," Harvey said. Wendell's breath quickened. "Suppose Karna bit her head off," he said. "Then we'll have to do it alone." "Do what?" "Find Hood." "But you told me he was dead." "I don't think being dead means much to a creature like him," Harvey said. "He's in the house somewhere, Wendell, and we have to hunt him down whether we like it or not. He's the one who stole all those years with our moms and dads, and we won't get them back until we face him." "You make it sound easy," Wendell said. "The whole house is a box of tricks," Harvey reminded him. "The seasons, the presents, they're all illusions. We have to hold on to that." "Harvey, look." Wendell pointed ahead of them. Harvey knew the street at a glance. 33 days ago, he'd stood here with Rictus, and listened to the tempter tell him what a fine place lay on the other side of the mist wall up ahead. "This is it, then," Harvey said. It was strange, but he didn't feel afraid, even though he knew they were walking back into their enemy's arms. It was better to face Hood and his illusions now than to spend the rest of his life wondering about Lulu and mourning the years he'd lost. "Are you ready?" he asked Wendell. "Before we go," his friend replied, "can we get just one thing straight? If the house is all illusions, then how come we felt the cold? And how come I got fat from eating Mrs. Griffin's pies and—" "I don't know," Harvey cut in, doubt running a cold finger up his spine. "I can't explain how Hood's magic works. All I know is he took all those years away to feed himself." "Feed?" "Yeah, like a vampire." This was the first time Harvey had thought of Hood that way, but it instinctively seemed right. Blood was life, and life was what Hood fed upon. He was a vampire, sure enough. Maybe a king among vampires. "So shouldn't we have a steak or holy water or something?" "That's just in stories," Harvey said. "But if he comes after us?" "We fight." "Fight with what?" Harvey shrugged. The truth was he didn't know, but he was sure that crosses and prayers weren't going to be any use in the battle that lay ahead. "No more talk," he said to Wendell. "If you don't want to come, then don't." "I didn't say that." "Good," said Harvey, and started toward the mist. Wendell followed on his heels, and just as Harvey stepped into the wall, he snatched hold of his friend's sleeve so that they entered as they had exited, together. The mist closed around them like a waterlogged blanket, pressing so hard against their faces, Harvey half thought it intended to smother them, but it only wished to keep them from changing their minds. A moment later, a tremor moved through its folds and spat them out the other side. It was high summer in Hood's kingdom, the lazy season. The sun, which had been hidden by rain clouds on the other side of the mist, was beaming down on the house and all that prospered around it. The trees swayed in a balmy breeze. The doors and windows of the house, its porch and chimneys, all gleamed as if newly painted. There were welcoming songs in the eaves, welcoming smells from the kitchen, welcoming laughter through the open door. Welcome everywhere, welcome. "I'd forgotten," Wendell murmured. "Forgotten what?" "How beautiful it is." "Don't trust it," Harvey said. "It's all illusion, remember? All of it." Wendell didn't reply, but wandered away toward the trees. The honeyed breeze gusted around him as if to pluck him up. He didn't resist, but went where it led, into the dappled shade. "Wendell," Harvey said, following him across the lawn. "We've got to stick together." "I'd forgotten about the tree house," Wendell said dreamily, staring up into the canopy. "We had such fun up there, remember?" "No," said Harvey, determined not to let the past distract him from his mission here. "I don't remember." "Yes, you do," said Wendell, smiling from ear to ear. "We worked so hard up there. I'm going up to see how it looks." Harvey grabbed his arm. "No, you're not." "Yes, I am," he snapped back, wrenching his arm from Harvey's grip. "I can do whatever I want. You don't own me." Harvey could see by the glazed look in Wendell's eyes that the house was already working its seductive magic. It could only be a matter of time, he knew, before his own powers of resistance were worn away. And what then? Would he forget his work here entirely and become an empty-headed boy, laughing like a loon while his soul was sucked away? "No," he said aloud. "I'm not going to let you do it." "Do what?" said Wendell. "We've got work to do," Harvey told him. "Who cares?" Wendell replied. "I do, and so did you 5 minutes ago. Remember what it did to us, Wendell?" The wind in trees seemed to sigh at this. "Ah," it said, as if it now understood Harvey's purpose here and would waft this intelligence to the ears of Mr. Hood. Harvey didn't care. In fact, he was pleased. "Go on," he said, as the gusts flew toward the house. "Tell him! Tell him!" He turned on Wendell. "Are you coming?" he said. "Or am I going to go in alone?" "Well, I don't mind going in," Wendell said cheerily. "I'm hungry." Harvey stared hard at Wendell. "Don't you remember anything we said out there?" he demanded. "Of course I do," Wendell replied. "We said we were going to..." He paused, frowning. "Going to..." "This place has stolen time that belonged to us, Wendell." "How did it do that?" said Wendell, still frowning deeply. "It's just... Again he faltered, searching for the words. "Just such a perfect day." The frown began to fade again, and a broad smile replaced it. "Who cares?" Wendell said. "I mean, on a day like this, who cares? Let's just enjoy ourselves." Harvey shook his head. He was losing precious time here, which was exactly what Hood and the house wanted. Instead of wasting any further words on Wendell, he turned on his heel and headed toward the front door. "Wait for me!" Wendell hollered. "Can you smell that pie?" Harvey could, and wished he'd put some food in his belly before he'd started out on this adventure. Knowing that these tantalizing smells were all part of Hood's repertoire wasn't enough to stop his mouth from watering or his stomach from grumbling. All he could do was think of the dust to which his ark animals had turned when he'd stepped out into the street. The pie on the kitchen table was probably made of the same bitter stuff, concealed beneath a veneer of sweetness. He held on to that thought as best he could, knowing that the house into which he was about to step would be full of such blandishments. With Wendell again trailing a step behind, he climbed the porch steps and marched into the house. The moment they were both inside, the door slammed behind them. Harvey reeled around, his skin crawling. It was not the wind that had thrown the door shut. It was Rictus. Chapter 17. Cook, Cat, and Coffin. "Great to have you back, boy," Rictus said, his smile as wide as ever. "I told everyone you wouldn't be able to stay away. Nobody believed me. He's gone, they said. He's gone. But I knew better." He started to wander toward Harvey. "I knew you wouldn't be satisfied with a little visit. Not with so much fun still to be had." "I'm hungry," Wendell whined. "Help yourselves," Rictus grinned. Wendell was off at a sprint into the kitchen. "Oh boy, oh boy, oh boy," he hollered. "Look at all this food." Harvey didn't reply. "Aren't you hungry?" Rictus said, raising an eyebrow high above his spectacles. He cupped his hand behind his ear. "That sounds like an empty belly to me." "Where's Mrs. Griffin?" Harvey said. "Oh, she's around," Rictus said mischievously. "But she's getting old. She takes to her bed a good deal these days. We laid her down somewhere safe and sound." As he spoke, there was a mewling sound from the living room, and there at the door stood Stew Cat. Rictus scowled. "Get out of here, pussy," he spat. "Can't you see we're having a conversation?" But Stew Cat wasn't about to be intimidated. She sauntered over to Harvey, rubbing herself against his legs. "What do you want?" Harvey said, going down on his haunches to stroke her. She purred loudly. "Hey, that's fine and dandy," Rictus said, putting off his anger in favor of a polished smile. "You like the cat. The cat likes you. Everybody's happy." "I'm not happy," Harvey said. "And why's that?" "I left all my presents here, and I don't know where." "No problem," said Rictus. "I'll find 'em for you." "Would you do that?" Harvey said. "Sure, kid," said Rictus, persuaded that his charm was working again. "That's what we're all here for, to give you whatever your heart desires." "I think maybe I left them up in my bedroom," Harvey suggested. "You know, I think I saw 'em up there," Rictus replied. You stay right here. I'll be back. He took himself up the stairs, 2 and 3 at a time, whistling tunelessly through his teeth as he ascended. Harvey waited until he disappeared from sight, and then went to check on Wendell, letting Stewcat slip away. Ah, now, this, a voice said as he appeared at the kitchen door. It was Jive. He was standing at the stove, as sinewy as ever, juggling eggs with one hand and tossing pancakes in a pan with the other. What do you fancy? He said. Sweet or savory? Nothing, Harvey said. It's all good, Wendell piped up. He was almost hidden behind a wall of filled plates. Try the apple turnovers. They're great. Harvey was sorely tempted. The buffet looked wonderfully tempting. But it was dust. He had to keep remembering that. Maybe later, he said, averting his eyes from the heaps of syrup-drenched waffles and bowls of ice cream. Where are you going? Jive wanted to know. Mr. Rictus is finding a few presents for me, Harvey said. Jive smiled with satisfaction. So you're getting back into the swing of things, kiddo, he said. Good for you. I've missed being here, Harvey replied. He didn't linger, just in case Jive saw the lie in his eyes, but turned and headed back into the hallway. Stewcat was still there, staring at him. What is it? He said. The cat took off toward the stairs, then stopped and cast a backward glance. Have you something to show me? Harvey whispered. At this, the cat bounded off again. Harvey followed, expecting her to lead the way upstairs. But before she reached the bottom step, she veered off to her left and led Harvey down a narrow passage to a door he had never even noticed before. He rattled the handle, but the door was locked. Turning to look for Stewcat, he found her rubbing her arched back against the leg of a small table set nearby. On the table was a carved wooden box. In the box was a key. He went back to the door, unlocked it, and pulled it open. There was a flight of wooden steps in front of him, leading down into a darkness from which a sour, dank smell rose. He might have declined to descend had Stewcat not hurried on past him, down into the murk. With his fingers trailing on the damp walls to the left and right of him, he followed Stewcat to the bottom of the flight, counting the steps as he went. There were 52, and by the time he had descended them all, his eyes had become reasonably accustomed to the gloom. The cellar was cavernous but empty, except for a litter of rubble and a large wooden box, which lay in the dust maybe a dozen yards from where he stood. What is it? He hissed to Stewcat, knowing the creature had no way of replying, but hoping for some sign nevertheless. Stewcat's only answer was to run across the floor and leap nimbly up onto the box, where it began to claw at the wood. Harvey's curiosity was stronger than his fear, but not so much stronger that he dashed to pull off the lid. He approached as though the box were some sleeping beast, which for all he knew it was. The closer he got, the more it resembled a crude coffin. But what kind of coffin was sealed with a padlock? Was this where Karna had been laid, perhaps, after the beast had dragged its wounded body back home? Was it even now listening to Stewcat scratch on the lid, waiting for release? As he came within a yard of the casket, however, he laid eyes on a clue to its contents. An apron string, left hanging out of the box by whoever had locked it. He knew of only one person in the house who wore an apron. Mrs. Griffin, he whispered, digging his fingernails under the lid. Mrs. Griffin, are you in there? There was a muffled thump from inside. I'm going to get you out, he promised, hauling on the lid as hard as he could. He didn't have the strength to break the lock. In desperation, he began to search the cellar, looking for some tool or other, and found himself 2 sizable rocks. Hefting them, he returned to the casket. This is going to be noisy, he warned Mrs. Griffin. Then, using one stone as a kind of chisel and the other as a hammer, he assaulted the lock. Blue sparks flew as he struck at the metal, but he seemed to be making no impression until, all of a sudden, the lock gave a loud crack and fell to the ground. He paused for a moment, a feather of doubt brushing his brow. Suppose it was Karna's coffin. Then he threw the rocks aside and hauled off the lid. Chapter 18. The Bitter Truth. He almost shouted out loud, seeing the terrible state that poor Mrs. Griffin was in. She was staring up at him with wild eyes, her hair pulled out in clawfuls, her face purple with bruises. A foul rag had been stuffed into her mouth. Harvey carefully removed it, and she began to speak, her voice a hoarse whisper. "Thank you, my sweet, thank you," she said. "But oh, you shouldn't have come back. It's too dangerous here." "Who did this to you?" "Jive and Rictus." "But he ordered it, didn't he?" Harvey said, helping her up. "Don't tell me he's dead, because I know that doesn't matter. Hood's here in the house, isn't he?" "Yes," she said, holding on to him as she climbed up out of the box. "Yes, he's here, but not in the way you think." She began to weep, the tears clogging her words. "It's all right," Harvey said. "Everything's going to be all right." Her fingers went up to her face and touched the tears. I thought I'd never cry again," she said. "Look what you've done." "I'm sorry," said Harvey. "Oh, no, my sweet, don't be sorry. It's wonderful." She smiled through her tears. "You've broken his curse on me." "What curse?" "Oh, it's a long story." "I want to hear." "I was the first child who ever came to Hood's house," she said. "This was many, many years ago. I was 9 when I first walked up the front path. I'd run away from home, you see." "Why?" "My cat had died, and my father refused to buy me another. And what do you think Rictus gave me the very day I arrived?" "3 cats," said Harvey. "You know how this house works, don't you?" Harvey nodded. "It gives you whatever you think you want." "And I wanted cats, and a home, and—" "What?" "Another father." She shivered with fear, remembering the horror. "I met Hood that night. At least, I heard his voice." Stewcat had come to her feet, and she paused to stoop and gather the creature into her arms. "Where did you hear him?" Harvey asked. "In the attic at the top of the house. And he said to me, 'If you stay here forever and ever, you'll never die. You'll grow old, but you'll live until the end of time and never weep again.'" "And that's what you wanted?" "It was stupid, but yes, I did. I was afraid, you see, afraid of being put into the ground like my cat." A new wave of tears came, running down her pale cheeks. "I was running away from death." "Straight into its house," Harvey said. "Oh, no, child," Mrs. Griffin said. "Hood isn't death." She wiped away her tears so as to see Harvey more clearly. "Death is a natural thing. Hood isn't. I would welcome death now, like a friend I'd driven away from my door. I've seen too much, my sweet. Too many seasons, too many children." "Why didn't you try and stop him?" "I have no power against him. All I could do was give the children who came here as much happiness as I knew how." "So, how old are you?" Harvey asked her. "Who knows?" she replied, laying her cheek against Stewcat's fur. "I grew up and old in a matter of days, but then the passage of time seemed to lose its hold on me. Sometimes I've wanted to ask one of the children, What year is it and the world outside? I can tell you. Don't, she said, putting her finger to her lips. I don't want to know how the years have flown. It would hurt too much. What do you want, then? To die, she said, with a little smile. To slip out of this skin and go to the stars. Is that what happens? It's what I believe, she said. But Hood won't let me die. Not ever. That'll be his revenge on me for helping you to escape. He already had Blue Cat murdered for showing you the way out. Hood's going to let you go, Harvey said. I promise. I'm going to make him. She shook her head. You are so brave, my sweet, she said. But he won't let any of us go. There's such a terrible emptiness inside him. He wants to fill it with souls, but it's a pit, a bottom.
All right, everyone. I'm going to call into this live for tonight. I want to thank everyone for stopping by and everyone who keeps stopping by. Excuse me. I want to thank everyone stopping by and everyone keeps stopping by. I appreciate all y'all's support. Till next time, everyone. Y'all stay safe out there.